Hi, everybody. How you been? How long has it been? I feel like I don't know how to do a live stream anymore. Welcome. You've reached the 220-1001 Core 1 A Plus study group for February. We're about 10 minutes from getting started. So if you're watching this on the replay, you can hang out with us here in the main room, or you can always check back. Now, I'm looking at my audio levels, and they're not what I expected them to be. So you can tell this has been a while since we've been doing this. Hi, chat room. Hi, everybody. The audio levels are okay. I just need to talk into the mic. Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. We've got all questions in the first hour. I'll be asking you questions from the 220-1001 Core 1. And then in the second hour, I'll just open up the phone lines and we'll take phone calls. See how many of you around at least the U.S. are able to call in. It's kind of snowy out there. It's kind of bad weather out there. I hope everybody's staying safe. Those of you that have power can join us, I guess, on your mobile device. Hope you have a way to charge up and stay warm. That's the key. There's Canada's checking in, my Canadian friends. Hello, Toronto. Hello, Indiana. Erie, PA. Oh, it is. It's kind of cold up there. We were just talking to some family in Hamilton that say, yeah, they got a little bit of snow. They got a little bit. So Arizona, California, you guys are probably in good shape. Alabama, ice and frozen snow. Wow, that's just crazy. It was a really bad week for weather. Just a lot of cold. Just a lot of cold and ice and snow. I hope everybody's staying safe. We've got all Q&A, though, so you can bundle yourself up for the live stream. Why would you do that? I don't know, but here we are. Let's make sure I have everything going. Recording is going. You see my Cylon going down there. Recording's also going over here on OBS, so that's good. You can kind of see me up here. Hi, it's me. It's me. Let me talk to the camera. We've got cameras are up and running. That looks good. I've already got the graphics in. That's good. Audio here is good. I guess we could get that. So, okay, we're in good shape. We are in good shape. Portugal is here in Houston, Texas, and Los Angeles, California. Kentucky's here. Minneapolis, 1 degree Fahrenheit. That seems cold. It seems a little chilly. That's all I'm saying. There's Arkansas. Graham, Washington. Yeah, I think I will stay in Florida. I think that's a fantastic. I was born in Florida. I've never left Florida. I mean, I've left Florida to go places, but I've never lived anywhere but Florida. I've never left Florida. No, I have left Florida, but not to live. There have been times when I've had the potential to live in California, to live in the DC area. There were all these job things going on, and I actually flew up to Virginia in I think it was January or February. Took the train from the airport through the snow. Had the meeting with this company. It went well. It was a great interview. It was for a systems engineer position with a router company. And walked out the door, and suddenly they had stopped hiring, had a hiring freeze. Ironically, the freezing cold trip to Virginia was ultimately resulted in a hiring freeze. So there you go. Didn't get the job. Turns out it worked out. So we're fine. We're okay with that. Hello, Memphis. Dallas, Texas. 10 degrees. Really? Is it 10? Am I reading that right? Hello, El Paso and Louisville, and Massachusetts. Thanks for being here. Hello, Oregon. There's Saudi Arabia and Poland. Folks checking in from across that pond. Thanks. Oh, you lived in Hollywood? Family's Cuban. Raised your kids in Alabama? There's a whole thing happening there. Where do you get good pastelitos in Alabama? That's the real challenge, isn't it? My cafe con leche. That's the real issue. See, I married a girl from Miami. So There's a whole lot of mixed up stuff. You probably got the same thing going on in Alabama. There's just a whole bunch of cultural barbecue things happening there. Oh, that's all good. That is all good. Because there's no bad food there. It's just, you just added on to more good food. Now you've got a big grouping. This is my problem. Oh, I've managed to at least stay away from a lot of that during us being in. So that worked out okay. We will be starting at the top of the hour. Got 5 minutes or so to go. Why do I not have my time up? There we go. 4 minutes to go. Carne asada. So good. We've got questions in this first hour. We'll get going in 4 minutes to get that going. Hopefully I can remember how all of this works. There's a couple of buttons to push, so I will figure all of this out in a moment. We've also got, it's a little cold here. It's in the 50s here, Fahrenheit. So it's still kind of cold. I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt just because it's more convenient for the live stream. But yeah, that's a thing. How are we? How's the cameras look? They look pretty good. I've got this. This needs to come over. All right. All right. This is the part that's probably the worst for you to have to sit through, is me trying to figure out, do I have everything ready to go? But I figure getting on 10 minutes beforehand is better than just having a graphic up that's counting down the 10 minutes. That doesn't help at all. Yeah, I can imagine Alabama's not really prepared for snow. We don't know what to do with snow here in the South. I'm sort of North Florida, South Georgia, so we don't know what to do. We know how to wrap our pipes. We know it gets cold. We're used to cold. We know to stay off the roads when it gets icy. We don't swap out tires. There's not a seasonal thing we do. We don't winterize, pools or cars. There's no chains you put on tires here. There's no snow tires you swap out. There's no conversion to winter here. You just simply drive and live the same way you do now, except you put a jacket on. But when it snows, that's a completely different animal. It's now below freezing, and we don't know how to drive in the snow, and there's a whole thing happening there. So we just stay in. We stay in. We make sure we have some bread and some milk and some water, and we stay inside. And that works out fine. So here we are. We're staying inside. So that's pretty good. We'll stay with that. Yeah, we don't know what we don't understand. We don't understand what snow is or how it is to live in snow. And it's good that my family can sort of point at me and go, ha ha, you don't know how to live in snow. And I don't know why they're doing that, because I'm sort of thinking the same way, like, yeah, I don't know. I don't live in snow. I don't know that that's something I'm very proud not to know how to live in snow. Just, I can't handle it. And I can't. To be fair, I can't handle it. I do not have the ability to handle the snow or cold weather in general. Just never have not built that way. Very thin, the blood. That's how it works. How do you get to the website to answer the upcoming questions? We'll talk about that in a moment, but you can pop open a new browser window and go to professormesser.com/QA. We'll redirect you there. So you do not have to shovel sunshine. That is so true. What is that even like? See, there's a whole world of things that have to happen that I just have no perspective on. I understand that I have worked places. I used to work for companies based out of Massachusetts. We go up there in the winter. I get a feel for it, but it's not the same as when you're living there. It's a different thing that happens. Less than a minute to go. We'll get things started here. We'll do some Q&A. We'll talk about technology, and then the after show, we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. You can ask questions in the chat room. We're just glad to have you here. We're just glad to be here. We'll do this Core 1 study group today. We've got the Core 2 study group for Thursday, a couple days from now. We'll do the same thing again for Core 2. And next week, I'm doubling up also with Network Plus and Security Plus. It's kind of a weird month. We're sort of crushing everything together into a 2-week period, which normally I extend it out. March is going to be weird too with dates. So just always keep checking back on the calendar and all those things, and you'll be fine with that. Let's get things started, though. It's top of the hour. Let's do a study group. Let me adjust a couple things. You're going to look at that slide just a little bit longer while I push some buttons on this side that I forgot to push. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 2021 Professor Messer Core 1 A+ Study Group. It is a cold winter day here in the United States. You're watching this on the replay. None of that really matters because it's whatever it is outside your window right now. But for those of you that are stuck inside, we're so glad you're able to join us. We've got an hour of 220-001, the Core 1 A+ Q&A. I'm going to ask you questions from the exam. You're going to answer them online. We'll talk about all the details from that as we go through it. There's plenty to talk about. How you will participate. I have something right here that will show you. There it is. You can follow along with us. If you are here live, you can answer the questions live. Now, if you're watching this in the replay, this won't be available to you, but you can still follow along with us. Simply pop open a new browser window and go to professormesser.com/QA. That stands for question answer. See how I did that? There's also an app you can get. It's called the Socrative Student app. There you go. You can go to that. And of course, when you get there, we'll ask you for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer, all one word. Make sure you spell it right, PROFESSORMESSER. And you can, of course, join us with that. If you do all of that, there will be a question waiting for you. That question asks, a question from last month, as a matter of fact. That's our rewind question to see if you can figure out how to make all of this work. The question asks, each time a computer starts, it shows a date and time error. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would that be a certificate error, an incorrect time zone setting, Bluetooth not connected, a bad motherboard battery, or a network disconnected? You can see a few of you have answered already. We will come back to that in just a moment, see if you can get in and answer the question, and we will look at the answers and talk about that in just a bit. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us on the live study group. This is something we're able to do every month for the Core 1. We've got another one for Core 2, another one for Network Plus, another one for Security Plus. You can always find out when the next event is going to be by going to our calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. Don't forget that we're putting new videos on YouTube all the time. There's, of course, a way to look at that at professormesser.com/YouTube. If you're studying for Security Plus right now, you've noticed in the past month, I think we put 70 videos on YouTube, 70 in the past month. We have put quite a few videos on YouTube. So, and there will be the same number at least over the next month. So if you're into Security Plus, there will be plenty there for you to go through. Don't forget about our daily pop quiz questions on Twitter and on Instagram. If you like Instagram and looking at pretty pictures with your questions, you can find that at professormesser.com/Twitter and professormesser.com/Instagram. Sometime in this first hour, I will give you some instructions on how you can receive an email from me that will grant you 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then this doesn't apply to you. But if you're someone who is collecting CEUs, just listen in sometime during this first hour, and I'll give you all the details then. We're going to talk about the A+ exam today. We're going to talk about specifically the 220-1001. As many of you know, you have to pass 2 exams to earn your A+ certification. On Thursday, we are doing our 220-1002. So come back in a couple days. We'll do another live stream on those topics. This was an exam series that was released on January the 15th of 2019. We estimate that the retirement for this would be 3 years and 6 months after that, 3.5 years. But that would put the retirement somewhere around July of 2022. And that's probably right now a pretty good estimate. We don't know how the schedule will change because they did push Security Plus. They did push Network Plus. It's possible they might push A+ as well. But that's so far in the future, we don't have to worry about it. You're talking about more than a year from now. So if you are studying for your A+, as you sit here right now, keep studying for your A+. You're doing the right thing. You're watching the right thing. You're reading the right thing. Keep doing that. You're doing exactly what you should be doing. Don't forget that to pass the exam, which is a 90-minute exam, you need to earn a 675 on a scale from 100 to 900. It's kind of odd, but that's the scale they use, and that's the number you need. There's no way to know how many questions that is because each question is worth a different amount. So just do the best you can, and if you do that, and hopefully it'll come up to be more than 675 points. That's the only strategy I can recommend at this point is do the best you can, because you can't count it. There's no formula. It's impossible. I think that's by design. If you were studying from previous exam versions, I just saw a question about this past week on Reddit where someone had some of those 900 series exam materials, but there have been 21% of the exams brand new. So if you're studying from old materials, there's a huge chunk you're missing, and it's certainly a large enough chunk that could have a dramatic impact on your final score. Don't use old materials. Make sure that if you're taking the 221,001 and the 221,002, that your study materials specifically state that they are for the 221,001 and 221,002. Also, don't forget the exam objectives. Go to professormesser.com/objectives. Make sure you download those. The 221,001 exam covers a number of different topics: mobile devices, networking, hardware, virtualization and cloud computing, and hardware and network troubleshooting. So all the questions that we're going to do today come from those 5 domains. There's going to be quite a mix of questions that come through on those. So stay with us. We're going to take you through all of those by the time we're done with this today. Online on the website, on the Professor Messer website, I've taken all of this A+ content and I've stuck it all together into one single product. So, of course, all of my videos are available for you to watch online all day, every day. You can go to YouTube and watch everything without any cost whatsoever. Some of you would like to have an offline version. You would like MP3s. You would like my course notes. You would like my practice exams. You would like my exam hacks ebook. You would like preferred access to the Q&A in these study groups. So I've created for you a success bundle, and you can find out more about this on the Professor Messer website at professormesser.com/1001success. You can also purchase individual pieces of this. So if you don't want the whole bundle, you just want the practice exams, or you just want the course notes, or you want to bundle those together for a discount, you can do that too. It's all on that same page, professormesser.com/1001success. That will get you there, or follow the links right there for what we are doing. We have also free questions on the website. I love free. And here's some free things for you too for the A+ exam. You'll find 10 question practice tests with our Take 10 challenges. You can find them for A+, Network Plus, Security Plus. Hundreds of questions are there. You can find them at professormesser.com/take10. There's also a video replay of this study group available after we're done, but there is also a podcast version of this. If you have a podcast listening program and you like to go through podcasts and have them automatically download to your device, you can find the RSS links available on my site at professormesser.com/podcast, and you can find that for A+, Network Plus, Security Plus. It's all there and available for you to see. If you go to the study group on YouTube, you'll also find about a day later, my marketing manager, Lori, goes through and puts timestamps on the whole study group. So you know exactly when the questions are, where the answers are, where everything is. Thanks, Lori. Lori's listening to the replay right now. Everybody say hi to Lori. She's watching the replay of the chat as well. So she sees everybody who says hello to her, and she says hello back. There is about a day delay, sometimes less, sometimes more. So if it's not there immediately, don't worry. Lori will get those up, and you can go back years and look at these study groups. Plenty there to look at. Don't forget also about my course notes on the website. The course notes are a fantastic resource for you if you're planning to finish up with the exam. The course notes provide you with a breakdown of everything that's every important thing that's in my videos. You've got the pictures, the text, the details. It's all there on my site. Have a look at that as well at professormesser.com/1001notes. All right, let's get back to the actual content that you came here for, which is answering these questions. Let's look at this rewind question that asked, each time a computer starts, it shows a date and time error. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be a certificate error, an incorrect time zone setting, Bluetooth not connected, a bad motherboard battery, or the network disconnected? Now, if you were here last month, because this is our rewind question, you and many others chose D, bad motherboard battery. So 87% of you say that that is the problem. And in fact, if you're doing anything with the power on self-test during the boot process, then you know that that can be an annoying problem to run into. You're ever trying to get through, oh, there we go, with the boot, and you're seeing the message come up saying the date and time has not been set. It's because the battery isn't there and the machine was unplugged during that time frame. So that's one of the really only uses of that motherboard battery at this point, is to remember the date and time. So such a simple task, and occasionally, especially if years go by, you have to swap those out. So that becomes useful to know, especially if you keep getting that over and over every time you turn on your computer. What a pain to have that there. So hopefully you remember some of those questions. If you were one of those that answered answer D, 88% of you got that one absolutely right. Bad motherboard battery is the reason for time and date error when you start up your computer. So let's talk about some other types of questions. You know, some of you have been working with some of this content for a long time, and you've gone through the videos and you've got your books. One of the things you may not realize is when you go to sit for your exam, there was, or there will be, a series of questions at the beginning of the exam, about a handful of questions, around 5, sometimes less, sometimes more, that will be non-multiple choice questions. You know, the question we just did was multiple choice, where there was a question and there were multiple choices to choose from. But there are a number of questions you'll get at the beginning of your exam that are not multiple choice. They are anything but multiple choice. CompTIA calls these performance-based questions. These can be a fill-in-the-blank question. They can be a matching question. They could ask you to put things in a particular order from highest to lowest. There could be a question that is a set of pull-down answers or drag and drop. You never know exactly what the question will be, but the topic in the question comes directly from the exam objectives. So I've created for you, as I do every month, a brand new set of questions. And the very first one of these new questions is a performance-based question. So the question I have for you today is, it's kind of a hard one. It's a little bit of a fill-in-the-blank question. So for those of you, you were talking about this in the chat room before we even got started, and I didn't say anything because I knew this was coming. Your performance-based question of the month asks, list the type of protocol, meaning TCP or UDP, and the port number associated with these particular descriptions. So the first on our list, number 1, transfer files between Windows computers without NetBIOS. What protocol and port numbers used to do that? We've got number 2 is view the desktop of a remote computer. What port and protocols used for that? Securely view the console of a Linux computer. What would you use for that one? Oh, if I had only given you matching, it might have been easier, but what good is that? Number 4, receive an alert from a router. What would we use for that? And lastly, transfer files between macOS computers. What port and protocols used for that? These are important things to memorize because they are used constantly in looking at NetStat and looking at your firewall and talking to other people managing larger network-based firewalls, at understanding what these technologies do that we see on our screen. How are they communicating over the network? And one of the things you'll notice, and it's true on this question as well, is that CompTIA rarely asks you a trivia question. They rarely ask you for a particular protocol, what's the port number? Instead, they give you a question that's a lot like this one, where there is a description. There is a larger extra step you have to go through to answer these. So that's why I gave you one that would get you thinking, because you first have to see the description of what I put down. Then your brain has to put into mind, well, what protocol does that? And then on top of that, I'm asking you to tell me the port number. So if you can get half of that, I'll give you half credit if you can tell me what protocol it is, but then full credit if it's TCP, UDP, and then the number. So how about that? That might be a little bit easier, but that's the process. Is I want you to go down that step of understanding what is the broad protocol we're asking for, and then what's the layer 4 port and protocol, TCP, UDP, and protocols. A lot of protocols here, aren't there, to have to deal with. TCP and UDP, knowing and differentiating between that and knowing where a protocol is TCP and where a protocol is UDP is actually very important. They don't tend to make a big deal about the importance of that on the CompTIA website and the exam objectives, but it's super important when you start using these technologies in the field. So you do need to know if a particular process is TCP or UDP. That's why I asked it in this question, because it is important to have that there. Let's step through each one of these and see how you did with this one. Let's see how many people, not a lot of people answering this one so far. Of everybody online answering, you are only just now submitting your answers to this. That's how I know. Stop Googling. You can't Google anyway, because I made this up this past week. This is brand new. Google's never seen it before. So this is a hard one to Google. So you might as well just give it a shot. Let's start with the first one on our list. Number one is transfer files between Windows computers without NetBIOS. Transferring files between Windows computers used to be only done over NetBIOS. There was a time we didn't have TCP IP running on our networks. I know that's hard to believe, but there was a time where none of us were doing IP subnetting. We weren't adding IP addresses. We knew nothing of IP addresses. Well, then if we didn't have IP, how did Microsoft devices send files to each other? They used NetBIOS. That was the transport, which is not a great transport. So we got rid of it. We'd like, if we're going to use IP, let's just use IP directly without NetBIOS. The protocols used for that is Server Message Block, or SMB. And the protocol used for that is TCP running over port 445. So that is the correct answer. If you're looking to transfer files between Windows computers without using NetBIOS, a direct SMB connection, it uses TCP 445. Let's go to number two on our list, which asks to view the desktop of a remote computer. Now, again, I'm asking you for the TCP UDP and then the port number. But if you think about what is that, what application is doing that desktop of a remote computer, well, that would probably be Remote Desktop Protocol, or RDP. That's one way to do it. I would take a couple of different options or answers there, but RDP is such a common way to do this on Windows. TCP 3389 is the one that you would use for this. Number third on our list to go through that is securely view the console of a Linux computer. That's a very specific question. We have a console, we have Linux, so there really could only be one thing that you would use to do that, or one thing you should be using to do that, and that's SSH on TCP port 22. SSH is secure shell. That's what you would use. So it doesn't use the desktop. You're not really doing a remote desktop view of this. You're simply sending and receiving secure shell information. Let's move to number four. Number four is receive an alert from a router. This is probably the hardest one in here because it's not completely obvious what I'm talking about with this. You kind of have to know what it's using for this. And it's using an SNMP trap, a simple network management protocol, but it's not us performing a request to see what statistics are on that device. It's a device proactively sending us an alert. In the world of SNMP, that's called an SNMP trap. Why they don't call it an SNMP alert? I don't know. They don't. They call it a trap. It's a trap. I don't know why they call it a trap, because it's nothing that would trap you. This is an important piece of information we're receiving. It's an alert, and it uses UDP over port 162. You know, the query that we do with SNMP is over 161 commonly, but TCP 162 is used by the incoming alerts or trap messages. Yes, this question is a trap. And lastly, to trap you, this last question is transfer files between macOS computers. macOS, yes, there's macOS. There's Linux, there's macOS, there's Windows. All of those are on the exam. You have to know what all of them are. And there will be, of course, questions from the exam objectives that deal with the Apple Filing Protocol, or AFP. And transferring files between macOS computers uses that Apple filing protocol over TCP 548. TCP 548 is what you would use. If you ever start to get into a situation where you're trying to figure out what port number would I use for this, what port number would I use for that, these are the ones that are listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. So make sure that you go through. They give you a list of all of them. And you don't have to go outside the scope of that list. It's a very specific list. Those are the only ones you have to know, and you're in good shape. So that's why I commonly suggest sticking to the exam objectives. I have seen people put information on their study guides that list out hundreds of port numbers, and they're spending so much time memorizing hundreds of port numbers and protocols. You don't have to do that. There's like 20. That's all. That's it. That's all you have to know are the ones listed in the exam objectives. So stick to those objectives and you'll do fine. So transferring files between Windows computers without NetBIOS is TCP 445 using SMB. Viewing the desktop of a remote computer is TCP 3389 with the remote desktop protocol. Securely viewing the console of a Linux computer is TCP port 22 or SSH. Receiving an alert from a router is an SNMP trap over UDP 162. And transferring files between macOS computers is TCP 548 using the Apple filing protocol or AFP. Wow, that was a lot. And I realize that was a hard question. But if you are in the mode of thinking about the exam and thinking about performance-based questions, these could be the types of things that you would want to know. So that is one of those that comes in very handy. Before we continue on the chat room, there was a good question here. How do you differentiate if something is UDP or TCP? Well, it's not really a differentiation. It's that this particular protocol, like SNMP, uses UDP almost exclusively. There's every implementation you'll find of somebody using SNMP, it uses the UDP protocol. So you do have to remember that that's what that protocol uses. If you configure a firewall to block TCP port 162, you would not be blocking traps because those run over UDP. So that's why you do have to remember the differences between these. Most of the protocols you're going to be learning on the A+ are TCP protocols. There are only a couple that run using UDP. SNMP is one, DNS is another. There's not a lot that goes outside that scope, so it makes it kind of easy for your exam. Just remember that those two or three, whichever one it is, those are the UDP, and then everything else is TCP, and you'll do fine. There are differences between the protocols and the way they work. There's videos on the site that talk about that, my introduction to networking and introduction to IP, so you can get a feel for why we use UDP and why we use TCP and why it is important to have those there. Let's shift gears now. Let's move away from performance-based questions and let's do some multiple choice-based questions. I have one for you that is a RAID question. The question asks, a drive in a RAID 10 array has failed. Well, that's not good. Which of the following would be the best way to resolve this issue? Would you replace all drives and rebuild the array? Would you replace the bad drive and restore from backup? Would you replace the bad drive and rebuild the array? Would you replace all drives and restore from backup, or no additional actions are required? Those are your 5 options for this one. A drive in a RAID 10 array has failed. Which of the following would be the best way to resolve this issue? This is the one you would like to know when you work through this. Is it replace all drives and rebuild the array? Is it replace the bad drive and restore from backup? Is it replace the bad drive and rebuild the array? Is it replace all drives and restore from backup? Or no additional actions are required? If you think you know the answer, please do not put the answer in the chat room. You instead want to go to professormesser.com/QA. That big blue bar on your screen is exactly where you will want to go to get that done. One of the things that you'll want to do with these questions is kind of parse them out. These questions are shorter in some cases than what you will find on your exam, so you will have to go through the exam and read through these to be able to find those. I think it becomes important to kind of break these down. There are only a certain number of RAID types you have to know. Again, go back to your exam objectives, because if you go to the online view of this, if you go to look at a Wikipedia article on RAID. There are so many different RAID types, but the exam really is very specific to 4 different RAID types that you need to know. And that's it. Those are the only 4. But you look online, there's like 20. Nope, you only need 4. So that's the important part for these and being able to have that there. So hopefully you will be able to memorize those 4. And in fact, the RAID types you will use in normal work are probably going to be one of those 4. You very rarely want to go outside the scope of that and use some other type of RAID that's listed on there. Very, very unusual to see that there. I have a NAS that I run here that is very specific to even a proprietary RAID, but it's kind of built on RAID 5. So that's what you'd find. And in fact, some of you are even mentioning, yeah, you found some materials that did a RAID type that wasn't listed in the exam objectives. You can ignore that. Why you would? There's plenty of things you can learn outside the scope of the exam objectives, and you will be learning those when you start working with technologies. But we're talking about passing the A+ exam. So I try to focus your efforts on here's what you need to know for the exam. And quite honestly, the exam objectives are your best bet. They will tell you everything you need to know, and you don't have to go outside that scope. The exam stays very close on the RAID types. So there are some RAID types you don't need to know, but if you go to your exam objectives, you'll be fine. Let's see how you did with this one. A drive in a RAID 10 array has failed. Which of the following would be the best way to resolve this issue? Would it be to replace all drives and rebuild the array? Would it be to replace the bad drive and restore from backup? Would it be to replace the bad drive and rebuild the array? Would it be to replace all drives and restore from backup? Or no additional actions are required? Let's see how we did. 49% of us say replace the bad drive and restore from backup. 43% of us said replace the bad drive and rebuild the array. And then single digits for everything else. 4% of you said no additional actions. 3% of you said replace all drives and restore from backup. 1% said replace all drives and rebuild the array. Every RAID type is a little bit different in how you would react to a problem, because every RAID type has a different form of redundancy. In some cases, there's a RAID type that has no redundancy, like RAID 0. RAID 0 has 0 redundancy to be able to have that there. So there is a section, this is in the video section 5.3, troubleshooting hard drives, where I show you each RAID type. I show you the disks that are required to build that RAID type. And then on a failure condition, what do you do? So for example, RAID 0, for those of you remembering back to your RAID video, remember, let's go back in time, back to that section that talked about RAID. You know that RAID 0 is 0 redundancy. RAID 0 has no ability to keep things going or maintain the data if it loses a drive. If the drive fails, your data's gone. That's it. So you always have to have a good backup. RAID, of course, is not backup. RAID is not backup. Did I mention that RAID wasn't backup? You have to back up your RAID arrays. It's important. So the RAID, for RAID 0, if you lose a drive with RAID 0, you have to rebuild. You have to pull it back from backup. Not even rebuild from backup. You have to restore completely from backup. So there's not much you can do outside of that. But there are other RAID types like RAID 1, RAID 5, and RAID 10, which you'll sometimes see written as RAID 1 plus 0, where if you lose a drive, the users don't even know. The users have no idea the drive even failed because you've created an array type that actually has redundancy built into it. So that's why when you start looking at these RAID types, you lose a drive, the array will work just fine. If you RAID 5, you lose a drive, all drives need to be operational but one of them. And with RAID 10, you can lose all but one from each set of mirrors and you're up and running still. So losing a single drive with RAID 1, RAID 5, and RAID 10 means that you can keep running. In fact, I've run into situations where I've gone to a customer site and their RAID 1 array failed months ago, but they had no idea because the system was still running and having all of that there. For RAID 1 plus 0, which was the one we're talking about here, or RAID 10, you've got effectively a striping you're doing Well, with RAID 0, but as I mentioned, RAID 0 is zero redundancy. Why would you want to do RAID 0? That's a horrible idea. Okay, but what if for each of those stripes, we duplicated it and had RAID 1? What if we did that? That would provide redundancy, because then if we lost this drive, you got a complete duplicate still running there. In fact, in this picture, you could lose 3 physical drives and this would still be running. That's a pretty good redundancy right there to have that piece. But the important part is the data's still there. The users can still access their data. Everything is working exactly the way it should be from the user's perspective. So all you really have to do is pull out the bad drive. That's important that you know which one to pull out. Don't pull out the wrong drive. Pull out the failed drive. That's a key to this. And then put in the new drive, because most RAID arrays are running SATA. They're running serial attached storage. They're using some type of hot swappable hardware. So I can pull out the drive while everything's running. I can push in the new drive. Everything's still running. All the data is still there. So I don't need to restore from backup at that point, because all of the data is still existing in the array due to the redundancy type we chose. So all we have to do is tell the array, hey, go to that new drive and rebuild. Add the redundant data and everything else to it so that everything comes back to the place that it should be. Replacing the bad drive and rebuilding the array, answer C, is the right answer. 43% of you chose rebuilding the array. So that is the one that you would want to do. No additional actions required. Well, there's a bad drive. You do need to get the drive replaced. This would be something you would need to do. There would be replacing the bad drive and restoring from backup. Why would you restore from backup when you didn't lose any data and everything is still up and running? So no reason to restore from backup with that. Replace all drives and rebuild the array. Why would I replace all of the drives? Only one failed. So I don't need to replace every drive in the system, thankfully. There wouldn't be anything to rebuild, by the way, if I replaced all the drives. So that doesn't even make sense. A definitely doesn't make sense. You called me on that one. Only 1% of you chose that one. Replace all drives and restore from backup. I mean, you could, but you've lost data and you've got downtime when you do that. Why would you do that? Don't do that. That's something you could do, but not something you would want to do, because I asked you for the best way. That is in no way the best. That's the worst way. So only 3% of you thought that as well. And that's why the only good answer here is answer C. Replace the bad drive, only the bad drive, and click the button to rebuild the array. Generally, the arrays do not rebuild on their own. You have to go to a console for the RAID array and say, I've replaced the bad drive. Here's where I plugged it in. Please restore the system, rebuild the array so you're back up to full redundancy. Because you don't want to be in a situation where you've lost a drive, and before you can fix the drive, before you can rebuild the array, you lose another drive. That is not what you want. So that's why we always say to replace that drive, rebuild the array, get it back up and running as soon as possible, and you'll be in really, really, really good shape. And that's why with RAID 10, C is your only good answer. Replace the bad drive and rebuild the array. You got to love RAID. Over this past month, while we were between January and February, I lost a drive in my NAS. And I made a video of losing the drive and replacing it, and the challenges I had replacing it. And not only did I look, and I had a very interesting thing I found when I pulled out the bad drive. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You're going to have to watch the video once I edit the video and get it up and running. Found some interesting things when I removed the drive. I ordered a new drive, and then I'm not going to tell you what happens, but something happens with the new drive. So it never goes according to plan. So always have a plan A, plan B, and plan C, which I did not have. Now I do. I will try to get that video out in the next week or so, because that one is pretty interesting to add that there. Let's do another question. For this one, of course, we answered C, replace the bad drive and rebuild the array. 44% of you got that one absolutely right. Let's do another question. This question asks, a user in the accounting department would like to use a stylus on the display when working with spreadsheets. Which of the following would be required to provide this functionality? Would it be an inverter, OLED, 802.11ac, a digitizer, or a CCFL backlight? A user in the accounting department would like to use a stylus on the display when working with spreadsheets. Which of the following would be required to provide this functionality? Is it an inverter, OLED, 802.11ac, a digitizer, or a CCFL backlight? If you think you know the answer, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. That's where you want to go to be able to lock it all in and figure out the details. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We're all going to answer this one as if we are working in front of our exam. We don't have access to Google. We're going to do the best we can for all of these. Let's see how well you do with this one to make all of those happen. Whenever I start getting into the details of these questions, you should be able to go through and break each one of them out into its separate pieces and see if you can go through each question and each answer, and you might even have a chance to do kind of a calculatus eliminatus kind of scenario. So see if you can get rid of the ones you know can't possibly be the right answer, and you're going to have a better chance of getting it right once you do find the right answer and having all of those. So that might help. You had at least a 20% advantage, right? Most of the questions on the exam are only going to have 4 answers. I tend to give you extra answers to make them a little bit more difficult. But there will be questions on your exam that have 5 answers and 6 answers and 7 answers to choose from. Some questions, not a lot, but some questions have multiple answers you have to choose. And it will tell you how many. It would say pick 2 or pick 3. So you at least know how many to choose. But it's not all A, B, C, or D. Some of them you do have to go back and figure out the details for this to be able to break it down. Let's see how you did with this one. A user in the accounting department would like to use a stylus on the display when working with spreadsheets. Which of the following would be required to provide this functionality? Would it be inverter, OLED, 802.11ac, digitizer, or CCFL backlight? Let's look at the results. 92% of you said digitizer. Is this going to be one of those situations where we all think it's one thing and it turns out to be something else? Because everybody else is single digits. 5% said OLED, 2% said inverter, 1% said 802.11ac, and 1% said CCFL backlight. 91% of you said digitizer, and the reason for that is that was the right answer. It is a digitizer. That is the technology that is on this particular display that is able to determine where we're pointing with that digital pin that we are using. It's taking an analog input and turning it into a digital input. It's digitizing it to have that there. That's pretty useful to have that functionality. You'll find on laptops, on tablets, on devices that are hybrid between laptops and tablets. There are digitizers on our mobile phones. It's not always with the stylus. Our finger as an input is connecting to and using analog input. This is my analog input, and hitting the button on my phone is digitizing that analog input. So that's what that's about, is being able to make that happen. That is a key piece to knowing some of these technologies, especially these days. We have way too many of these technologies to go through. If you're someone who's ever worked with laptops, mobile devices, you're going to be doing some type of digitizer troubleshooting. Would not be an inverter. An inverter is the device on the backlight, and in some cases on your device itself, but on the backlight that converts the backlight from DC to AC power so that it can power the cold cathode fluorescent lamps that you would find back there. If you don't have CCFL backlights, and most of your newer devices don't, they're usually LED backlights that use DC power, so an inverter is not required. So it simplifies things, certainly for problems that we used to have with our displays. That's one less thing we kind of have to worry about these days. But if you are working on an older laptop, you're still going to find those in there. You may be asked to troubleshoot with those and being able to work through it. OLED is a type of display that is nothing specific to using a stylus. It's just a technology used for display, like LED, OLED, those types of display types, but nothing in OLED somehow turns it into a display that works with a stylus. That's a kind of an off-putting term to put in this particular question because it has nothing to do with really the question or the answer. The next on our list, 802.11ac, is a wireless technology. Again, has nothing to do with a stylus or using a stylus on a display. And the CCFL backlight, as I mentioned, is a type of backlight used on LED monitors, older ones used in conjunction with an inverter. Again, has nothing to do with using a stylus. You would need a digitizer for the stylus piece. That is the right answer. And those of you that chose D, digitizer, 91% of you got that one absolutely right. So I'm going to give you a call back now. This happens a lot on your exams, is you will see things appear that seem familiar. And we're going to see, this is kind of a test I want to do to see how familiar it is for you. This next question on our list asks, a corporate firewall contains a security policy that drops all traffic flows matching TCP 3389. Which of the following would be affected by this firewall rule? Would it be remote screen sharing? Would it be encrypted web server traffic? Would it be macOS file sharing? Would it be outbound VoIP calls? Or would it be VPN authentication? A corporate firewall contains a security policy that drops all traffic flows matching TCP 3389. Which of the following would be affected by this firewall rule? Would it be remote screen sharing, encrypted web server traffic, macOS file sharing, outbound VoIP calls, or VPN authentication? I think some of you are banging your heads right now because you think this sounds familiar. If you'd like to answer the question, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you will be able to lock in your answer to have all of that functionality. Whenever you start getting into the details of these questions, it does become a little more complicated to see it in different ways. So see if you know what different way this one is being positioned for you. This one you should not have to guess, but if you don't know, make sure you take a stab at it to be able to have this and figure out the details. The guessing is you would think this is something that might be relatively obvious. And if you're thinking that way, you're probably right. This should be relatively obvious. We'll talk in a moment why that is. And we'll talk in a moment about strategy for exams. This should help you with those strategies to work through these. This is, by the way, one of the biggest challenges people have. So some folks in the chat room are even mentioning this, like port numbers. Are there just, you have to memorize them, and it's almost such a rote memorization. It drives, and there's so many of them that CompTIA wants you to remember. If you've never worked with port numbers before, it seems like this is just a waste of time. But port numbers are in a way, a very easy way to remember how to do things once you start working with them. Because after a while, you plug these into a firewall rule or two, and suddenly they become second nature. So they're very, very common in your brain. It's just one of those things you always remember at that point once you have those. I list the port numbers in my notes. The port numbers are listed in the exam objectives. They're absolutely there. And they are important values, important things you need to know. I know it's that one is a little bit rote memorization, but the questions you get will not be trivia questions. You not only need to know the port number, you really need to know what that port number is doing for you. You need to understand, like this question, I'm giving you answers. I'm not giving you the application protocol in use. I'm giving you a broader perspective of what it's doing. And I think those are important to know as well. Let's see how you did with this one. A corporate firewall contains a security policy that drops all traffic flows matching TCP 3389. Which of the following would be affected by this firewall rule? Is it remote screen sharing, encrypted web server traffic, macOS file sharing, outbound VoIP calls, or VPN authentication? 76% of you said remote screen sharing. A good number there. All single digits for the rest. 8% encrypted web server traffic. 7% said VPN authentication. 6% said macOS file sharing. And 3% said outbound VoIP calls. Now, this question is an important one because it is asking a question about something we already talked about. This happens on your exam all the time. This is an important consideration on your exam, and why it's important that if you're not 100% sure about a question, you should mark it and come back to it later. Because later on in the exam, you might get another question that effectively answers a previous question. Happens all the time. And you should use the exam against itself. You should take these freebie questions and be able to go back to the previous question and fill in the right answer when you run into those situations. This is extremely useful to have all of those things there. For this case, remote screen sharing is what everyone mentioned, and that is that RDP protocol we mentioned earlier, where we are sharing the desktop of a remote computer over TCP port 3389. This is what you would find on mostly Windows. Windows is the big user of the RDP, remote desktop protocol, and the applications that use RDP, but there are clients that you can use on almost everything. My Mac OS has a remote desktop client. My iOS device, my Android devices, my Linux devices, they all have clients that allow me to connect to a Windows device using RDP. So even though the service running on a device is a Windows service, I can connect to that Windows service from many different operating systems to be able to have that there. Extremely useful to have that functionality from any operating system. And RDP is a very useful one to have if you're managing a Windows device. And in this case, remote desktop sharing, RDP is what we were looking for there. I didn't put in the answer RDP because I didn't want to make it a trivia question. I wanted you to figure out that port 3389, that's RDP, that's what I would use to do remote desktop, to a remote connection to a separate machine. That's what you want to do to be able to have those there. 3389 is the right answer that matches A, remote screen sharing. 76% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done with that one. You're getting, I think that's the last port number question we have, by the way. So those of you that you hate the port numbers, you can now relax. No more port number questions, I promise. Well, I don't promise. I just don't think. You never know. Maybe every other question is a port number. It's not. I'm not doing that to you. Let's kind of shift gears a little bit, though, because there's a lot more than port numbers that you're going to find on your exam, and there's a lot more than RAID that you're going to find on your exam. There's a huge number of topics on your exam. And one of the biggest challenges I have seen across the industry is that once you have watched the videos, you've read the book, you've done some hands-on and done some labs, and you're ready to know, am I ready to take the exam? And if you've gone through any of the Q&A that's available on the internet, some of it is just awful. The questions are bad. It's topics that are from previous versions of the exam that aren't asked anymore. The answers are wrong. It's just a mess. And I saw that and thought, we need some higher quality questions that are written to give you the same feel as an actual exam question, that give you an answer that's correct and obvious and very specific. And if you're like me, when you get a question wrong, it's so nice if you can understand why you got the question wrong. So that's what I did, is I wrote a set of practice exams that does that very thing. Let me show you what this is like. This is from my practice exam book for the 221001 section. Number A9 asks, a network connection in a conference room was installed years ago, and there's no documentation for the cable run. This is very real world. Connecting a device to the cable results in a successful Ethernet connection, so the other end of the cable should terminate somewhere in the wiring closet. Which of these tools would be the best choice to find the other end of the network connection? Is it a cable tester, a tone generator, a multimeter, or a crimper? And of course, you can choose the answer, maybe even make a note of the answer in another window if you would like, because this is a PDF book. I have some people that will turn on the annotation of their PDF. They'll mark it right here in the book. It's another way to do it. And you have links that are in the book that will take you right to the answer, Or I have a link here that takes you to the details. And I'm going to click that. It takes you forward in the book to the answer page that gives you the answers, B, tone generator. And it says a tone generator is used to produce an analog tone on one of the cables, and an inductive probe is used to identify the location of the cable on the other end. So that is one of the things you will find, but you'll notice for the incorrect answers, I give you each of the incorrect answers and tell you why each incorrect answer is the incorrect answer. Why wouldn't it be a cable tester? Well, cable tester is used to confirm the wire map, but you would first need to locate both ends before that would be possible. A cable tester doesn't provide a way to locate both ends of a cable. Why isn't it a multimeter? I explain why. Why isn't it a crimper? I explain why. So that when you get one wrong, you're already learning more about these other topics. And perhaps even if you get it right, you can read through each of the wrong answers and learn more about those wrong answers, because the question you get on your exam is going to be very different, but it might cover one of these technologies. So looking through the wrong answers, even if you get it right, can be valuable. Lastly, on this list, I have more information that takes you directly to the video that covers this topic. So if you wanted to watch the video later, and I've got a QR code, if you've got this in a book form and you want to use your camera and just put the camera of your mobile device up against that so it sees that QR code, it will take you there and show you exactly what I mean when in fact, I demonstrated in the videos of using the tone generator to be able to make that happen. And then when you're done with this, you can click the back button in your PDF reader. I just hit the back button on mine. It's the command bracket to go back, and then I can go to the next question. So I can just jump around from question to question and go through the entire thing this way. That's my practice exams. There are 3 practice exams in the book with 90 questions on each one, 5 performance-based questions on each one of those exams, so 15 total. So we cover kind of everything. And it's in this, and it's another great way to support the site as well. Not only do I think this is a valuable tool that you could use to really help you pass your exam, some of the highest quality Q&A you're going to find, in my opinion, but it's a great way to keep this crazy experiment going that we have here with our free videos. So you can keep these showing up on YouTube by contributing and keeping this whole process there. Learn more about this at professormesser.com/core1pe to be able to find out more about that. Let's do some more questions. I've got another one. Here we go on my list. Which of the following would be required to enable FDE in Windows? Would you need domain membership, an integrated GPU, HTT, Intel VT or AMD-V, or a TPM? Which of the following would be required to enable FDE in Windows? Is it a domain membership, an integrated GPU, an HTT, Intel VT or AMD-V, or a TPM? You think you know the answer? No answering in the chat room. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. So no port number, right? Like I promised, there's no port number there, but there are a bunch of abbreviations. What you have to know what all these abbreviations are, what these technologies are to be able to. The question itself has an abbreviation that's a technology that we have to know in order to answer the question. So if you don't know what FDE is in Windows already, there's a problem. You're going to have to guess. You have to take a stab at it to be able to have this here. At the end of this, you'll see where this is from. I give you all the details of what section this is from and where's he getting this from? Where's this crazy question from? You'll learn all of that. There's plenty to choose from here. This is where, whenever you start stepping through these questions, it does become a little bit of a challenge to try to figure this out, because you will see these abbreviations pop up and they'll just pop up on your exam. You had no idea it was there, to have all of that and the pieces of this. So hopefully you're familiar with FDE. And more importantly, once you know what that is, what do you need to make it work? That's the other part of this that becomes useful. So another one of those things to be able to have that there. Hopefully this can be helpful for you. I see a lot of you are locking in your answers. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asked, which of the following would be required to enable FDE in Windows? Would you need a domain membership, an integrated GPU, HTT, Intel VT or AMD, or TPM? How did we do? We're a little torn. 53%, just over half, we got a majority, said TPM. 19% said a domain membership is what you need. We've got 10% that said HTT, and you've got 11% that said Intel VT or AMD for these. So that is whenever you start getting into this, the whole strategy of these, knowing what FDE is probably the place we should start. FDE is full disk encryption. That is where everything on the drive is encrypted. Not just individual files, not just individual pieces of the drive, but the entire drive. Everything on there is encrypted. This is what you would put on a mobile device, for example, because if you lose a laptop, you lose a phone, you don't want anybody to have access to the data that's on this device, so you encrypt everything. In Windows, this is called BitLocker. That is their full disk encryption utility, and it integrates with hardware that's on your device. It's a specific kind of cryptographic hardware called a Trusted Platform Module, or a TPM. This is can be something you plug into. It could be an optional thing that plugs into the motherboard, like the TPM here. This one was optional. It was added kind of after the fact. TPM can also be built into the motherboard as well. It's not something you can take on and take off. That it's just part of the computer system itself and can't be removed along those lines. But the cryptographic functionality of this TPM allows your modern operating systems to work properly. It allows you to have a BitLocker to be able to work on this system. It prevents somebody from taking the drive out of your computer, moving it to another computer and seeing the information that's on that drive, because everything on the drive is encrypted. It's a fantastic piece of information. When you get into Security Plus, you'll have a lot more conversations about TPM and how it works. So for those of you that answered eTPM, that's the right answer. That is your Trusted Platform Module. You got that one absolutely right. 19% of you said a domain membership. We're referring, of course, to a Windows domain, an Active Directory domain, domain service. That domain membership, very useful for somebody being able to manage your system from a central location. Most all of the devices on your corporate networks are part of the domain. That's the Windows domain we're talking about. But being able to do full disk encryption does not rely or require you to be on a domain. You could run full disk encryption on your computer at home with no Windows domain. So that's one of those situations where it helps to be on a domain, but it's not required to enable full disk encryption. 10% of you said HTT, a hyper-threading technology. That is one that's commonly used with CPUs to increase the efficiency of the CPU. You don't need any type of hyper-threading that's not a requirement for running BitLocker in Windows. Not something you would use. 10% of you said Intel VT, the virtualization technology, or AMD, which is the virtualization hardware in the AMD CPUs. Those are CPU technologies. They are useful for being able to do virtualization, as that one implies, but has nothing to do with full disk encryption. You don't necessarily need to have Intel VT or the AMD features, AMD features of your CPU in order to do BitLocker. And last on our list, 9% of you said an integrated graphical processing unit, an external or built-in graphics card, effectively. Integrated GPU is one that's integrated into the motherboard. That GPU, not required for full disk encryption. Required if you want to be able to run a nice game with 3D modeling, but doesn't help you for doing full disk encryption. Not very useful to have any of those, broken it down. So the only answer here, the one that makes the most sense, the only one that makes any sense, is indeed E, the Trusted Platform Module. TPM was answer E. 54% of you got that one right. Now, by the way, if you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, and you would like me to send you an email that certifies that you must have watched this for that continuing education unit credit, then just follow these instructions. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. This is whether you're watching live or on a replay. Click the Contact Us link. The Contact Us link is going to pop open a form. In that form, put your name, your email address. I think you have to put your email address twice. In the subject line, if you'd be nice enough to put that this is for the February 2021 Core 1 study group. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, I want you to put the words integrated GPU. Oh, I mixed it up there a little bit. Integrated GPU is the super secret code word of the month. Now, if there's anything else you would like to put in that message, I read through all of these. You're welcome to put anything else in that message as well. I don't necessarily am not able to reply to all of these because I get hundreds of these coming in every month, but I can tell you now, I read through every single one of them. So thank you for putting those comments. It's kind of nice to read through the comments that you sent. If you don't want to put a comment, that's fine too. No problem. I will still send you back an email with those pieces. So that's your process. Go to the top or the bottom of the website, click the Contact Us link, put your name, your email, put that this is the February 2021 Core 1, and put the super secret code word of the month of integrated GPU. It takes me about a week to turn these around, but I will get them out maybe this weekend. We'll get them through here. I know we're at the top of the hour. We're going to do one more. The chat room wanted one more question. We're going to do one more question. We're in overtime, people. Here's our overtime question that asks, a customer logs into a cloud-based service and inputs the number of hours for each employee. The cloud service, period, which isn't listed here, period. The cloud service then processes all payroll checks. Which of the following would best describe this service? And I have a few options for you. The options are hybrid, PaaS, private, SaaS, or IaaS. There's no good way to say that, I don't think. A customer logs into a cloud-based service and inputs the number of hours for each employee, period. The cloud service then processes all payroll checks. Which of the following would best describe this service? Is it hybrid, PaaS, private, SaaS, IaaS? For those. Which would it be? Which would it be? Trying to figure out those details. If you think you know the answer, please do that answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer to have these here. See if you know what it is. This is one where you really do have to break down what all of these different technologies are, know what all these different technologies are, and how you would use them, because you will run into these types of questions on the exam. And the answer, of course, is TCP 3389. I think that's, did I give it away? No, it's not the answer. It's one of these five listed here. You have to lock that one in to have all of these and breaking those down. This would be a good one to know. This is probably one of the more challenging questions I get. People say I'm struggling through figuring out cloud services. So cloud services is something we should all be sort of spending a little more time on to be able to work through. So maybe you know what this one. A lot of you are getting your answers locked into this one. So let's see how we did with this. The question again, a customer logs into a cloud-based service and inputs the number of hours for each employee. The cloud service then processes all payroll checks. Which of the following would best describe this service? What would it be? Let's see how you did between the answers of hybrid, PaaS, private, SaaS, and IaaS. We have 66% of you that say that's SaaS, which I think is what most people would just put by default. I don't know if you really thought it was SaaS or just thinking that's the one I've heard of. 22% of you said PaaS, P-A-A-S. We have 5% said hybrid, 3% said private, 4% said infrastructure as a service, IaaS. For this one, which one would it be? Well, if we're simply logging in, putting in what we need to put in, we're just giving it some input, and we're logging out and everything else happens, we don't have to worry about anything else, then we really are talking about software as a service. SaaS for this one. Let me flip this over. Software as a service is where you are not having to do any work to develop an application. You don't have to load any software. You don't have to maintain an operating system. You don't have to do anything but use the service. If you are using Google Mail, you didn't program Google Mail. You didn't have to put in any forwarding header information into Google Mail. You didn't have to build the application for Google Mail. You don't have to update Google Mail. You don't have to maintain operating system patches for Google Mail. Just log in and you do your mail. That's software as a service. Taking all of that administrative overhead, the development effort that goes into creating an application, the maintenance of the application, the backing up of the data of the application, the fixing of security patching, don't have to do any of that. Then you're simply using it as software. That's software as a service. Somebody else is taking care of everything else. And that's why in this particular case, software as a service, 68% of you chose that. You chose that because that was the right answer. That's what you would do with this, is software as a service. Whenever you start working through these and breaking them down, that's what we're referring to. Now, what about these others that are on the list? We do have other things that are in this list of questions. We've got 21% chose platform as a service, or PAAS, platform as a service. The platform as a service is one where you have to do some development work. They give you some blocks. They give you some building blocks to work with, usually modules, and you put the modules together and you build out. I want first there to be a login page. And then when you log in, there should be a menu. And in the menu is an inventory program. Well, let me put all the blocks together so that this happens. Now, if suddenly you realize, well, we also, on the inventory part, we need to add some barcode reading. All right, well, let me go in and add the barcode reading. You're creating this. It's almost, you're the programming as a service. You have to do that. So PAAS is one that has much more work that has to go on to actually develop and put all the building blocks together. And that's why in my platform as a service slide, which I don't have here, but on my platform as a service slide, it's all Legos. It's putting the Legos together. They give you the building blocks, but you still have to build the house or the car or whatever it is you're building, or the spaceship, the truck, all of that. You have to put it together yourself. So that's why it would not be platform as a service, because in this scenario, we just logged in, we put in some hours for payroll checks, and then magically everything else happens. So that's why it would not be platform as a service. Also would not be infrastructure as a service. Only 4% of you chose that one. That's where all you get is hardware. Here's your CPU and your storage and your network card. Go. Oh, wow. I have to load an operating system. I have to load the application. I have to maintain the operating system. That's a lot of what I do on my site on ProfessorMesser.com. Is a cloud-based service. If you go to my website, it is effectively infrastructure as a service, although I have the cloud-based provider I use helps me maintain the systems. So it's almost like I'm using them as my IT department, but I'm effectively purchasing and buying and using infrastructure as a service because I have to load the operating system. I have to load the applications. I have to load the databases. I have to do all of that. And then they can kind of maintain it from there. It's what they do. It's kind of a different sort of scenario there. Would not be hybrid, which is a mix between public and private. And it would not be private, which would be my own data center. I mean, it could be, but that really doesn't describe this. If you're logging in and you're not doing this yourself, then this is a cloud service that's something external, would not be internal in your environment. The best option here, the only one that makes sense, is SaaS. Answer D, software as a service. 68% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done with this. Well, we've gone through this hour of questions, and every single one that you've seen here and all of the terms I use and all of the technologies that we've been talking about come directly from the exam objectives. You can find those objectives by going to ProfessorMesser.com/objectives. There's a link there that will take you over to the CompTIA website. It's a fantastic tool. It has everything you need to know to pass the exam. It doesn't go outside the scope of what you need to know. So if you're ever in a situation you're wondering, are we going to be asked about software as a service? Well, you'll know if you read the objectives. It tells you exactly what you need to know to be able to have that there. Make sure you get them. It's the best, most valuable free thing that you will ever use in your studies. Make sure you get your hands on that. We've got another A+ study group on Thursday. And of course, I do these every month. If you look at the schedule for next month, it's just crazy all over the place. On the 2nd of March is the 1001. So it's only a couple of weeks away, I guess. 2nd of March, then the 4th of March is the Core 2. Network Plus kind of skips way down to the 25th. You can see my schedule's a little chaotic right now. And then on the 30th is the Security Plus study group to be able to have that there. So March is kind of weird. These can also change. These dates change all the time. So if you're ever trying to figure out when is the next live event is going to be, or you just want to check in and make sure you know when it's going to be, make sure you visit my website, professormesser.com/calendar. Also on that link is a Google Calendar that you can link to your calendar. And I always update the Google Calendar if any of this changes, so it would automatically change on your side. So it's another thing you can do to always stay up to date with when the next live event is going to be. Well, the part where I ask you questions is sort of over, but we've got an after show after this. I'm going to open up the phone lines. We'll take questions from the chat room. We'll answer whatever questions you might have for whatever topic you would like. Doesn't have to be about A+, doesn't have to be about CompTIA, doesn't have to be about anything. You can just ask any type of question you would like. I don't have to answer them, I guess, but you can certainly ask it. We've also got my practice exams and course notes on the website at professormesser.com/1001 success. Don't forget about your daily pop quiz question on Twitter and on Instagram by visiting professormesser.com/Twitter and professormesser.com/Instagram. Also, I've got the YouTube videos, constantly putting things on YouTube videos. I've got a couple new ideas from YouTube videos just sitting here during this live stream. So there will be some new things coming out. We will talk about all of those. Stick around for the after show. Thanks for being here and joining us in our first hour of Q&A. It's always a good time, and we'd love to have you come back for the next one. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Okay, it's time for the after show. After show time. Let me see if I can if you could bear with me a moment, I will get the phone lines up and running. I will be taking questions from the chat room, so you don't have to call in with a phone. What good is that? I saw someone in the chat room was asking for my mobile number. Yeah, we won't be doing that either. That's just a bad idea in general. But I will give you this number in a moment where you could call in and do that. Let me click a few buttons on my side so I can host the show and get everything up and running. For the show, I use software as a service. I have a third-party software service that manages the phone process. So there's another good example since we're going with cloud-based systems and being able to make that happen. That's what that's about. Let me load up my Skype because I have to call into my own show. I know it's a communication by voice. Crazy. But there are people that still do it. So if you're old like me and you want to talk to somebody with voice, that's what this is. Bear with me one moment.
Thank you for.
You're welcome. I have to click something on this side. I have to put in some special numbers and click a pound sign. And the nice lady says,
enter your 6-digit PIN.
I will be glad to do that if I can remember what it is. And if I got it right.
Welcome, Professor Messer.
Thanks, nice lady. All right, that means the phone lines are even open. So I'll take questions from the chat room. We will be glad to talk to you on the phone itself over voice communication in the continental U.S. It's a toll-free number, 855-785-RJ45. If you are west of the Rockies, 855-785-7545. You can also call this number for free from anywhere in the world using Skype, because with Skype, you can call a toll-free number and you don't have to pay for any Skype minutes. So you can use Skype. You just have to put a +1 at the beginning, just as it shows on the screen, +1 855-785-7545, and you can call in as well. So folks are filling up the phone lines right now to have all of those. So let's talk about some questions that have come up in the chat room. There have been some good ones that have come up in the chat room to be able to have this here. Questions about when taking the A+ exam, do you know if they provide a blank sheet of paper and a pen or pencil to take notes on? Well, if you're going to a testing center, they generally will give you one sheet of a laminated page and a dry erase marker, so that in person you can sit there and write on the piece of paper with the dry erase marker. I'm assuming that they're still doing that if a testing center is open in your area. And I realize depending on where you are in the world, depending on where you are in the US, your testing centers might not be open. So if you're doing this online, they don't allow you to have anything around online. They expect you to have everything off of your desk, but they do have a whiteboard available on their on the testing center. I'm going to go to a website at Pearson VUE where they have the whiteboard available. Here it is, the testing center. This is home.pearsonvue.com/onview/whiteboard. So that's the link. You can't even see it because my big head's there. So home.pearsonvue.com/onview/whiteboard. And I say this because at the bottom of the screen, they actually have the whiteboard. So you can practice with the whiteboard. Usually most people, I think, would probably just use the text and they would type into the whiteboard. Can't even type. That's probably what it would look like during an actual exam right there. But it lets you get the feel for it before you sit down for the exam. So if you're taking it online, this is one of the reasons I tell people, wouldn't it be nice if you could just take it in a testing center so that you can actually write down things? But I realize that's not always an option. But at least they're doing that online. And the second follow-up to that was, are some of the performance-based questions open/short answer? Now, the one we did today was a fill-in-the-blank question where you didn't have anything to choose from. In actuality, there are no fill-in-the-blank questions that I've seen on the exam. I don't think any fill-in-the-blank questions will show up on a CompTIA exam. There were fill-in-the-blank questions on the older Linux Plus, but primarily because that was an exam from a third party that CompTIA was licensing. Well, now they're not doing that anymore. It's their own exam, and I think they changed that. Fill-in-the-blank questions they're difficult to grade. They're difficult for someone to understand exactly what is being asked of them. So I think it's good that CompTIA doesn't use fill-in-the-blank. The one we did today was fill-in-the-blank because I wanted to make it a little more difficult, but you probably won't get fill-in-the-blank on an actual exam. So that might help you if you're trying to figure out, what do you do? Where do you go with this? What options are available? At least you don't have to worry too much about fill in the blank. There'll be matching. There will be putting things in order from highest to lowest. There might be drag and drop questions. There might be somewhere you have to choose from a drop down box. But everything is pretty much easy to understand what they want from you. The questions aren't crazy. If you know what you are, what is on the exam objectives, you'll do fine. Doesn't matter how they ask the question. As long as you know what the topics are from the exam objectives, you'll do just fine with it. Let's go to the phone lines. We'll start with the 503 area code. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from?
Hello, my name's Ben. I'm from Portland, Oregon. First, I want to thank you for sharing your wealth of information and making the whole IT learning experience that much more enjoyable. My
Thanks.
question's pretty basic. I'm looking to purchase the vouchers for my Core 1 and 2 exams soon, and I noticed that you can purchase a bundle that includes a test retake. And I was curious, if you don't use that for the Core 1, if you can use the retake on the Core 2.
Yeah, some of these bundles that they put together are pretty appealing. From a cost perspective. It's on the CompTIA's website where you would purchase these vouchers to be able to do this. And they do have bundles where you can just, you're going to pass it, you just want the voucher. So you can just buy the voucher all by itself. But there are bundles that come with, I guess you can call it insurance, where you can purchase the voucher, and then if you don't pass the first time, you can take it again without having to pay anything extra, although you sort of did pay a little bit extra when you bought the voucher with the extra retake or the insurance on it, but it's less money than buying two individual vouchers. So there is a cost benefit there. You kind of have to look deep into yourself to think about, am I going to be able to pass this thing the first time through? And if I don't, do I really want to buy a brand new voucher again? So there's some financial questions. There's questions about yourself and how much you trust yourself. I don't know how deep we want to get into this. This is getting a little mental, but you kind of have to think about that when you're buying these vouchers and how you want to do it. But when you take that first exam and you pass it, the retake part of the voucher is now no good. It now goes away. It's connected to the first exam you took. So you would not be able to roll it over, if you will, to another exam. They don't allow that. They're linked together, and you can't unlink them or use it somewhere else or give it to somewhere else. It's use it if you need it. If you don't need it, it disappears forever. So that's unfortunately, that's the way it works, Ben.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That answers my question.
I appreciate the call. Best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's one of the challenges, is finding the right voucher to purchase. And for those of you that are students, listen to this very carefully. If you are a student, you are in classes, then you can get vouchers for effectively a 50% discount. If you go to the academic store, the CompTIA, just type into your Google machine, CompTIA Academic Store. That's what you want to type in. It will bring up on the screen, you go to this view, the first thing that comes up is the CompTIA Academic Store, where if you are a student, you get heavily discounted vouchers. So for example, how much does it cost for an A+ these days? It's expensive. But if we go to our voucher page here and we go to A+, $106. So that's an extensive discount. That's a big discount over the $200 and something voucher that you would normally have to spend. But you have to be a student. They want you to prove that you are a student and you are in classes. It used to be you just had to have an EDU email account. No. Everybody's got an EDU email account. Now they want you to verify it. So you have to provide class information, something that shows you really are in those classes. But that can save you a lot of money if you are a student and working through this. So don't miss that one. Don't pay full price. What are you doing? There are also a number of discount codes on the internet. You can find discount codes for about 10% off if you are not a student. That's about as deep a discount as you're going to find. Some sites might have a deeper discount depending on where they might have a shorter expiration date. I don't know. I'm not a CompTIA partner, so I don't sell these vouchers. So I just don't keep up with what's going on there. I will tell you to be very careful about buying a voucher from someone else. That's not necessarily the best idea either. If you're planning to do something like that, just make sure you vet it properly. Back to the phone lines. Let's go to the 847 area code. If I click the right button, it's spinning. It's thinking about it. It's maybe picking. There's the picked up on the line. Hello, caller. Which name are you calling from?
Hi, my name's Alex from Chicago.
Hey, Alex.
And again, thank you for all you do for all of us.
Appreciate you calling. What can we do for you?
My question is, I've taken all three of your practice tests, and I feel very confident on it. I'm just trying to fill in some of the gaps. And one of the things I struggled with was knowing which hardware component was needed to be upgraded for a given situation. I couldn't tell when the storage speed wasn't fast enough versus when you needed to upgrade RAM, because those two things kind of got mixed up in my head along with a couple other things. Any advice for something like that?
There is. A lot of that comes from the exam objectives. There is a section in the A+ exam about creating your own hardware, building your own systems, and customizing what hardware would be needed for those systems. I'm bringing up, for those of you that are watching this, I'm bringing up this page in the exam objectives. It's section 3.8 of the exam objectives, and it talks specifically, here it is, let me put my head in there so we can see this. It goes through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different hardware configurations: a graphics design workstation, an audio video editing workstation, a virtualization workstation, a gaming PC, network attached storage, thick client, and thin client. Those are the different pieces of hardware. And what they list after each one of those are the most important or the primary hardware components you would want in a system like this. I think some people sometimes get confused over this, thinking that's all you would need in a system like this, but that's not actually what they're saying with these. They're saying for a CAD/CAM system, which is a graphic, computer-aided design, computer-aided manufacturing system, what are the major and most important components on this? SSD, high-end video, and the maximum amount of RAM you can get. Because those systems, they use everything. They use tons of memory. They use tons of storage. They use tons of graphics. Okay, well, those are the three. So if somebody said on a graphics design workstation, which one of these is most important? SSD, high-end cooling, a RAID array, a gigabit NIC, or maybe a 10100 NIC, or a tuner card. You know, of all of those things, the only one that was listed in CompTIA's list of the most important things here is the SSD. I know I did say a gigabit NIC that was in here, but networking wasn't on here either, was it? So SSD would be the one that fits into that list. Now, the other pieces that were in there might even go into a graphics design workstation. You might have a RAID array inside of a graphics design workstation, maybe in a non-standard version of this, maybe one you put together. Maybe you need a RAID array for something. CompTIA is not saying that this is exclusive to this. It's saying that these are the most important components of this, that if you had to choose between SSD and a RAID array, you would choose SSD. If you had to choose between high-end video and a tuner card, you would choose high-end video. If you were choosing between maximum RAM and cooling, you would choose maximum RAM. So those are the lists of things that they put. And I think it's a pretty good list for those custom systems. Well, as technologists, we tend to sit around and fight with each other over what type of video card we would put into a system, what type of memory is really the most appropriate. No, you want this motherboard over that motherboard. No, we'll get this CPU because you can maybe turn that CPU up and overclock it a little bit. You know, we always fight about the nuances. This is a very broad perspective of the most important aspects of these particular custom systems. So you should interpret them that way. I have seen some sample questions from other places that really convolute this quite a bit, that don't do a very good job at getting to the meat of what CompTIA is trying to teach in this particular section. So if you focus on section 3.8 of your core 1 and memorize those pieces of it, you'll be fine. So that's why I mentioned it here, so that you would understand what they're trying to tell you, and then you would know in what context to put that if you get an exam question on it.
Great, thanks. I definitely didn't realize that in those exam objectives, the specifics were in there.
It's one of those situations where I'm constantly surprised over how much detail CompTIA put in here, because it just walks you through it. If you know it's there, it makes everything so much easier to understand when these questions come up.
Talk about multiple choices. You have them right there.
There it is. I can't beat that, Alex. I appreciate the call.
Thank you.
This is one of those situations where I do get people that will be in my chat room and they'll say, I took my exam and I failed. And they asked me questions I just was not prepared for. They asked me what the most important hardware would be for a CAD/CAM workstation. And I said, well, that's in the exam objectives. That's listed there. Do you have the objectives? And they go, well, I didn't download it because I just thought it was a high-level index. Well, it is not. Let me, in fact, give you a full-page view of these exam objectives. I'm going to go all the way back to section. We'll start with the front page, tells you what it's about, the different domains, then starts the objectives. This is section 1.1 through 1.7, section 2.0, 2.1 through 2.8, section 3.1 to 3.5, or 3.6, 3.7 to 3.11, section 4, section 5, and then pages of acronyms. There's tons of content in here. So this is why I tell you, always download the exam objectives. They tell you everything you need to know. It's right there. You really can't beat that. That's pretty strong. So make sure you spend some time looking through those objectives. It could be the difference between passing and failing, is knowing these objectives. Use them as your checklist. I build my videos from this list. Let me see if I can find mine just while we're talking about it. I'm going to bring up the exam objectives that I use when I'm building out this is kind of a subset of what I use, because as I go through it, I mark the things that I need to change, that I need to make different. I'm now doing it in a spreadsheet, so this one's not as marked up as some of the other versions I've used. But this is where I make sure that I cover everything CompTIA is expecting of us. They stick very close to the exam objectives, so you should stick close to the exam objectives as well. Pretty important to have that there. And you can get your hands on that, professormesser.com/objectives. Or just type in CompTIA exam objectives from the Google machine. It will take you right to it. Back the phone lines, the 540 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Paul. I'm calling from Virginia.
Hey, Paul. What can we do for you?
So I recently took the exam this past Sunday, and I missed it by a few points. But I have two questions that are on my mind that maybe you can help me with. I remember from the test.
Well, let's give me a very broad, because we can't give you any specific questions from the exam, but absolutely ask me maybe broad concepts that you would like more clarification on.
Okay, I got you. So something similar they asked was, in a corporate environment, what would be the best, what is the most common IP address you use, static or dynamic?
This is one we've kind of gotten so used to doing at home that I don't know why anybody would do anything different. But if you've never been in a corporate environment, this is something to consider. I have been in corporate environments that were all statically assigned. In fact, they were manually assigned. Someone would go to your workstation, they would manually assign the IP address at your workstation, and then that was your IP address forever, for life. That was what was hard-coded into that machine. I think the idea of those particular system administrators is they felt it was more secure, and they felt that they had a way to track a specific person by that IP address. They always knew that that IP address was associated with that person. It could never be anyone else. And I guess in a broad term, I guess they sort of were right along those lines. The problem is you can do that with 10 people, but it's hard to do that with 25 people or 100 people or thousands of people, which is what you run into in large environments. And that being able to maintain and have someone visit everybody's workstation is not only impractical, as we've seen in this last year, it's impossible. You can't do it. And that's why DHCP and a dynamic set of automatically assigning IP addresses is a much easier way to do it. In most corporate environments, it's in the vast majority, in 99.999% of corporate or large environments, it's all dynamic addressing. Because why do you want to be bothered with that during the day? Why should that be something on your list of things? We've built this DHCP process, a set of servers, an entire set of technologies around dynamic IP addressing, and we have ways to track it back to a person at any particular time. In some cases, you can even integrate it with your Active Directory so that you can put into a firewall, only allow James in accounting to be able to do this on the firewall. And it doesn't matter what my IP address is, it figures it out based on the DHCP servers and the Active Directory implementation. So this is one. Well, there's nothing like restarting, turn it all off, and turn it all back on again. And apparently we've jumped over to a different server over on the YouTube side. So at least we're back. I apologize for the disruption, but we've sort of worked around whatever problems YouTube is having, and we're back up and running. Thank you for so much for hanging out. And nobody dropped off the phone lines. So we have managed to get back. We have fought ourselves off of hold, and we'll talk to the 781 area code. Hi, caller. Which name were you calling from? Caller.
This is 781.
It is 781. Hello, caller.
How you doing, Professor Messer? I'm calling from Boston. I have a question about some of your. First off, I'd like to say the videos you make. I think the way you put notes next to the videos and during each section helps people retain information.
The notes being, do you mean like the
want
transcript, or do you mean the information that's on the screen?
Information on the screen.
Okay.
Because as you're explaining it, you can kind of summarize everything that you have put there. It's almost like a separate set of notes.
That's great.
But I was watching a video a few days back, and it was pertaining to, I think it's 2.6, using IP addresses. It's IPv6, okay?
Sure.
So I pull it up and I'm watching the video, and you know how you explained in the video how they take the bits, the 64 bits, and then they crunch it down, and then there's like an abbreviation. You remember explaining that, how they crunch down the 64 bits and they abbreviate it with zeros sometimes and call them?
Yep, they sort of compress it down, get rid of some zeros, put some double colons in, and give a shorter version of the address. Yes.
Yeah, so I was interested in that, and I found one section in the video where either I misread something or my question would be, when they're abbreviating that, I thought I saw an area when they abbreviate it, because the way you explained it in the video was, if there's a lot of zeros, they'll just fill it in with a colon, right?
Right, the double colon, that's right.
Yes, so I thought I noticed one area where I added up the zeros and the colon didn't really equal the amount of zeros. Is there ever a time where when they make that abbreviation, like one colon will represent multiple zeros or a stream of zeros in that address, or is it always an exact representation of, how they crunch it down? Does it always equate to the exact number of zeros, based on what colon they put in there, or double colon? Is it always an exact formulation, is really my question, because I thought I noticed maybe they skip a zero or skip a colon.
I'm trying to bring up the video. I don't know if in the current A+, I talk about IPv6 compression, which is the term we use to discuss IPv6 and the way that it works, and the way that you're able to compress those down. I'm looking for that video. I want to say that's part of the 1001 exam, but like many things, there's so much that sort of blends together in my mind with assigning.
I got it on page 24.
All right. And then I'll just have to find the right section for the IP addresses and assigning those network connections for the IPv6 compression. But to answer your question, the part that the double colon plays is filling in a group of zeros or multiple groups of zeros into set of just a double colon. For instance, in many IPv6 addresses, you could have 4 or 5 or 6 different sections of zeros. These zeros would be these sections of 4 zeros, which are 2 bytes, 2 hexadecimal bytes of these. And instead of writing out 00 colon, 0000 colon, 0000 colon, instead you just put a double colon in its place, and it takes the place of all of those zeros that happen to be consecutive inside of the address. But the number of zeros it's replacing can be variable. It could be replacing 1 set of zeros, 2 sets of zeros, 3 sets of zeros. It could be replacing all zeros. In fact, a : 1 is an IPv6 address for a loopback, which means everything's a 0 except the number 1, the last one that's in the address itself. what you have to kind of figure out is, based on everything you have, how many zeros do you have to fill in to match 8 groups of the address numbers that are in this list. So you're the one that has to figure out how many zeros it's replacing, but ultimately it all ends up with 128 bits worth of content. You just have to figure out how many zeros or how many additional groups of zeros need to be put back into the address based on the double colon, because we can only have one double colon in an address. Can't have multiple double colons, because then you wouldn't know how many zeros you're replacing in each section. So you can only have one set of double colons, and then you would extrapolate out how many of those you need.
Thank you.
It's kind of a counting game at that point, but it is one that does come in handy, and it saves a lot of time if you got a lot of zeros in your IPv6 addresses.
I appreciate all your hard work. This is something I'm interested in, and I'll keep studying.
Stay on it. It is probably one of the most gratifying industries out there. And you being in the Boston area, there are huge opportunities available in IT there. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, Professor Messer. I'm only a few miles from MIT and Harvard, just so you know, and keep up the good work.
I appreciate the call.
Everything.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That is geographically, that's a good place to be. It's a lot of opportunity in that Boston area. Spent a lot of time talking with companies up there and what they were doing with IT. And it's remarkable how much technology is going on in that section. It used to be that area up there was turning into kind of a Silicon Valley of the East, if you will. So there and in North Carolina, you've got huge amounts of technology that people are building and doing things with. So I think that's great. And doing that, are we dropping frames again? I'm not surprised, of course. I'm looking at my YouTube statistics, though, and we're still up and running. So we're going to go with it. We're going to think YouTube has figured out the details, and maybe they're not having a good day. And to be fair, right now in the U.S., we've had huge winter storms come through. Connectivity in general is not the best. So we may be suffering some of that through the things that are happening there. Let's go back to phone lines. Thank you for holding for so long. The 646 area code. Hi, caller. Which name were you calling from?
Hi, my name is Jerome. I'm calling from the New York area. And just want to thank you for just the input that you put out there for so many people. But I do have a question that's been bothering me, and it has to do with RAM.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Sure.
Okay. So I came across a question where a technician upgraded his RAM, right? And he now has 8 slots where he has full RAM. He has like 256 gigabytes of RAM. But when he powers on his computer, it only recognizes 128, right? So what he did, he updated firmware, everything that he needed to do, and still only 128 gigs was recognized. Then he decides to put in 64 gigabyte amounts in the computer, and it recognizes each and every, all the 64 gigabits in the computer. And then they say, well, what is the problem? And I just, for the life of me, I could not figure out what it was. And then this is a practice exam. And then the answer is that it said that it was because he was inputting DDR3 and DDR4. But the problem that I'm having is I thought that RAM is not backward compatible. So how is it that you can have DDR3 and DDR4 in the same computer and it recognizes it?
You know, I mentioned when I was talking through my practice exams before, and some of you may have listened into that, where I was saying that what I found in the industry is that some of the practice exams that were available out there were perhaps not the highest quality. that they did not provide an accurate representation of materials, that the questions and answers themselves weren't based in reality. That I didn't go into quite this much detail, but that's what I found, is that a lot of these practice exams were written by someone who has no concept of this technology whatsoever. And they have questions like this one that say, oh, they were using DDR3 memory. They should have been using DDR4. But as you, the smarter one in this whole equation, knows, that those memory modules are constructed differently. You've watched my videos and you've seen physically on the screen that the slots are in a completely different place. They're notches in the memory that are specifically designed to prevent you from plugging DDR4 memory into a DDR3 slot and vice versa. Physically, you can't do that. You would be defying the laws of physics to be able to do what that question says you did. So this, unfortunately, is one of those examples. And maybe it's just a single one-off. I'll give the writer of this particular grouping of questions the benefit of a doubt that this one slipped through the cracks, and they published a question where the answer could not possibly exist because that's not how memory works. Now, the answer is you're smarter than the questions. Unfortunately, those are you'll run into these questions. You'll run into these practice exams where the questions have no relationship with reality. That, unfortunately, this now also plays into people thinking that the actual exam is this way, when in reality, the actual CompTIA Plus exam gives very specific questions. The answers are very non-ambiguous. You know, if you know the content, the right answer will jump right out at you. They will not be based, the vast majority of these on the actual exam have a relationship with reality, so that you should be able to step through questions and find the right answer without somehow turning off logic, which unfortunately on some of these practice exams exists, like the one you just mentioned. So you are smarter than the exam. You actually got it right, and the exam got it wrong. So good points for you. I think you know that you're doing well with your studies when you can pick out questions that, wait a second, doesn't quite sound right, and I think I'm smarter than this question. In this case, Jerome, I think that's absolutely true.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I appreciate the call. Best of luck.
Thank you.
It's one of those that's very frustrating, although this is why I wrote these practice exams book. It takes months to write these books. And as I'm starting the process of writing the book, one of the things I think about is this going to be something people can use? And then I get a phone call like that. And of course they can, because there's some really bad exams out there for those types of things. Here's another one. They had a practice exam where someone said, describe a token ring network. As it's not in your exam objectives, as someone who was the maintainer of the CompDCOM token ring frequently asked questions file, take you back there. I'm a token ring expert. I'm literally a token ring expert. Knowledge that is worthless can't be used anywhere. And I am very, very familiar with token ring. You do not need to be familiar with token ring. Token ring is not in your exam objectives. It's not something you need to know. It's not even a term you need to know. You're not going to find it running anywhere. It's not part of your world. So don't even worry about it. Let's go back to the phones. The 626 area code. Tell me your token ring story, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
I'm Ricky from California.
Hi, Ricky.
So I want to thank you so much for your content. I've bought your course notes for Network Plus.
Oh, thank you so much.
I've also used your practice. Yeah, I've bought your practice exams and course notes for Security Plus, and I've passed both exams.
Oh, great.
And yeah, like when you say follow the objectives, I follow the objectives. Yeah, there's a lot of material out there that will, tell you to learn. Yeah, for example, token rings and whatnot. And then,
I know.
If I didn't see it in the course objectives, then, I just skipped it.
Don't understand why, but good for you. Way to stay the course, stick to the objectives, and you will be fine. Congratulations on passing those exams.
Yeah. And so the next thing I want to share was you talked about how you've had jobs where you worked at good companies and bad companies. And I want to see what your thoughts were on this.
All right.
So basically, I remember I got one of my first IT jobs out of college. And for the first month, I was like managing Windows 10 desktops. Then a month later, it turned out I also had to support Windows NT machines and Windows 98 machines.
Nice. Oh, and there went the phone lines and everything turned off. How about that? What is going on today? Like my whole system went into array. Like it looks like it's not able to call in on my phone. Okay, caller, I want you to hold on. We're going to get the phone lines, I think, back up and running. I have no idea what's going on today, but this is they're getting in, aren't they? We are going to change this. I'm looking at my balance on my account and everything. Oh, I see what the problem is. My credit card. What is up with that? Okay, we're gonna right in the middle of all of this. It would have been good to get a rundown. I literally ran out of money. That is literally what just happened. We're going to fix this right now. Add funds to my account on my credit card. Put in the card number. Can anybody see this? No. Click some buttons. What in the world is happening, everybody? This is really what happens in my world all the time. Let's submit that for processing. Stand by, because now I have to put in address information. Oh. And it's also snowing outside. No, not here. Wouldn't that be something, though? If I opened up the door and suddenly it was snowing. That would just be my day. Well, when I came in here, it was 50 degrees. But now, not so much. We're going to try this again. We're going to host a show. We're going to click some buttons. We're going to start the show. And I have to call back in, just like everybody else does, to get this going again. Don't you love it? Is it live? We have to wonder if this is.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome for me doing that. My entire world crashed.
Enter your 6-digit PIN.
This sounds familiar, doesn't it? Worst live stream ever. I'm so sorry, everyone.
Welcome, Professor Messer.
Thanks, nice lady.
Show recording is on.
Well, I didn't turn on a recording, but that's nice to have all this. Okay. We are back up and running. Is my phone line work? It is working. So we are getting people calling back in. The phone number on the screen remains the same. Apparently it's still working. That caller can try back again. I apologize, everyone. As it turns out, my credit card has expired. So that's what happened whenever you run out of money. I had -1 cent. I mentioned earlier that I pay for the 800 number. Sometimes I don't, apparently. So there you go. Yes, those of you that this is your first live stream with me, usually a little bit more professional. So I apologize for that. Folks that are calling in, and the caller that was there, I don't even have your caller information up anymore because the entire thing hung up. But please try calling back again. We will figure out the details. But I used my 1Password. I have all of my credit card information stored in my encrypted online wallet. I clicked one button, it filled in all the details. So at least that part worked okay. Let's go to back to the phone lines while we're waiting for that original caller. We'll take caller from 559 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? And let's hope you stay with us. Caller. Is it maybe just me now? Hello, caller. Are you there? I have the potentiometer turned up. So this is good. So far, this is a great way to start. Are you there, dear caller? You know what? I'm not. Suddenly, I am no longer in the host. No, am I in the host room? I am. I just can't hear this caller. So I'm going to return that caller to the queue and wonder if perhaps this was something I did on my side, which is entirely possible. Let's try another call from the 240 area code. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from?
Hey, Professor Messer. My name is Kojo. How are you?
I am so glad I can hear you. Doing much better now. What can we do for you?
I'm doing well. This is actually, I don't know which particular live stream this is for me, but oddly enough, I was on your live stream last month, and I caught you at the tail end of it. I didn't call in. I actually was the one that asked about doing Network Plus in place of doing A Plus as my first certification.
Okay.
And I think you caught that question at the tail end. I put it in the chat room. And it's kind of the same question I have today. I am currently studying for the A Plus exam. I have failed it once before, and I'm kind of having second thoughts. And I was like, maybe, and I'm thinking, okay, well, the cost I'm paying for 2 exams instead of if I were to do Network Plus, I'm only paying for 1. Now that's kind of me saving money.
Sure.
But I've already put enough time and energy into studying for the core 1 already. So do you think I should just keep going with it, or should I just switch over? What do you think?
Well, give me some idea on what the end game is. So right now you've talked about Network Plus. You've talked about getting the A Plus down, but what is the thing you're trying to do with these? There's got to be, we generally just don't get certification exams because we would rather do that instead of playing Xbox. There's got to be some reason we're doing that. So what is your reason for doing that?
My goal here is to really ultimately, well, number one with these, I just want to get my foot in the door, but the ultimate goal is to get into cybersecurity or cloud computing, either one. Okay.
Perfect. So this is kind of the biggest challenge we have, is trying to get that first job in IT and knowing where we should go with that. And I probably if we were having a conversation about this last week, then I most certainly would have mentioned the video I have on my page, which is how to get a job in IT with no experience. And that's usually the situation many of us are in, where we're trying to, how do we get into the door when they only want somebody who's already had work experience, but how am I supposed to get work experience if I don't have a job? It's that constant catch-22 that we have. We're trying to get that job. And there's kind of some different approaches to that. The video I created on that, it's on my channel. Just search for Professor Messer, how to get a job in IT with no experience, and you'll find it. It's a 30-minute video. There's much more content in that video than I could ever talk about here. It is a dense video of content. There's no slack time in there. It's not 30 minutes of me, trying to get my phone line working. It really is me giving a very specific answer to that specific set of problems. I think the key for you is to figure out what people are who's hiring right now, and then what are they looking for when they're hiring for that entry-level position. The things have changed in the past year with what people are looking for, with where people may be located. There's a lot more companies hiring from people that are outside of their local geography now. People are getting a lot more used to people working at home. So there's got to be a list of things that an employer is looking for. So you need to find out, for the people advertising in your area, go to Indeed.com, look at LinkedIn Jobs, go to whatever online job sites you like to go to, and look at all of the entry-level positions. It's probably going to be help desk administrator, help desk support, support line, some type of entry level into that organization. They probably don't pay great, but it's an entry-level position. Of course they don't. That's where you need to start gathering intel. You need to look to see, what are they asking for? Are they asking for the A+? Are they asking for Network Plus? Are they asking for Microsoft certifications? What are they asking for? Depending on where you are in the country, they might be asking for something different. So there's no specific
actually-
answer that always fits. A plus tends to be a good generic fit there, but if you are in the DC area, then you'll probably have a lot more employers looking for Security Plus, because that's the entry level you need to get the certifications and the connections with the Department of Defense. They don't even care about Network Plus or A Plus. You have to start with Security Plus. Whereas if you're talking to a company out of Minneapolis, out of Orlando, out of LA, they may be asking for A Plus, or they might be asking for Microsoft, something in Microsoft world. You just never know. It's all different depending on who you talk to. So I think that's where you should start, is if you're ever trying to figure out, am I doing the right thing? Is this really the right cert? Am I studying the right content? You should definitely take a step back for a second and answer that question. Because if you're not sure, then we haven't got a good plan yet. We need a better plan. And that's where you want to get a better idea in your area what people want. And if you find out after looking at 10 different job openings and 7 of them want the A plus certification, well, there you go. There's your answer. You go, okay, I need to get this A plus done because 7 of these employers are asking for it. And the 3 that didn't ask for it, that's okay, because I'm gonna wave this banner when I get the A plus cert at them as well and let them know I'm A plus certified, even though they didn't specifically ask for it. You're getting somebody who knows even more than what you wanted. That I think is going to give you a better perspective. It'll give you a better plan. I think we all need to have that end game, what the end game is, but more importantly, how do we get there? You know, eventually you want to work in cybersecurity, but people don't tend to hire people off the street for cybersecurity unless you live in a geography that's some big cities where they have some security operations centers, SOCs, SOCs. That is the one place where you will start to see a lot of entry-level security. In fact, one of the few places that you see entry-level security. It's sort of like a help desk, but for security things. Very similar to a NOC, a network operations center, where it's sort of the main central hub for your network. Sometimes the SOC and the NOC are combined together. Sometimes the help desk is combined together with the SOC and the NOC. But if you can find somebody hiring just for a SOC, that might be an opportunity to fast track into cybersecurity. So there are other ways to get into cybersecurity. I started as a remote technician driving around in my Dodge Colt, fixing printers, delivering cables, installing hard drives. It was not a great job, but you learn a lot. And then you sort of, from there, I got a job working with operating systems. From there, got a job working on the network operating center side. From there, started working with the networks. From there, jumped into security. So the great thing about IT is there's always a path. Your path is going to be different than somebody else's path. These aren't on rails. It's an open world RPG we're dealing with here. And what you do is going to have a direct impact on your future. So you get to figure out the path and you get to influence the path. You just need to put together the plan that is going to be the best for what you want to do.
I got it. Thank you so much. That was I know you had referred me to your 30-minute video, but I think you and I can both agree that you pretty much just explained it.
It's always about what you're going to do, what's the direction going to be. You got to see yourself in that job. There's a little bit of that psychology there, but you also have to have step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. You got to have that path that gets you there. And as long as your path makes sense and it fits with the rest of the world and what they're expecting, you're going to get there. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some effort. It's going to take more than just certifications. It's going to take a combination of things, but you can get there. The path is there. You just need to make that happen.
I appreciate the help, Professor. Thank you. By the way, I know you asked where people are calling from. I'm actually calling from the DC metro area. So I guess your point about Security Plus being an entry level really does come in handy.
Go ahead and look at those job postings and see if it doesn't keep coming up from time and time again. It might be because of where you live. That might be the easiest way to get in some of these entry-level jobs. So we'll have to see how it goes.
definitely. Thanks again. I appreciate all your help.
Thanks for the call. I appreciate the call. It's always a challenge, though, to figure out if you've never gone through the path before, is there a way to really do that? And I think IT, better than any other industry in the world, there are options for you. If you're in a job now, so somebody on the chat room was mentioning you're in 7 years of IT, you're on the bench. You're sort of working with the hardware, or you're doing the bench IT help desk kind of work. So what's the next step? So now you've got this foundation of knowledge, and you probably have familiarity with hardware. You probably have some familiarity with software, with operating systems. Maybe there is a specific type of software you're working with, or maybe the organization you're with has some very specific industry tools that it uses. Well, now you can either move internally into that position, but in IT, we tend to have the best move up when we move outside of our companies. So that's why we tend to see people always moving to another company, because when you move outside of your company, somebody else is willing to pay you more money than the company you're with. I know, it's crazy. I don't know why companies don't invest more in the people that are already there, but they don't. And I think there are some psychological reasons for that. But if you really want to move, moving out is often your best case. This becomes a little bit disconcerting. It's a little nervous. It's a little nerve-wracking to move to another company. Once you do it the first 2 or 3, or in my case, 9 times, I've worked for many different companies in my career, because it tends to be a very common thing in IT. People don't look negatively. You stay somewhere for 2 or 3 years, you move to another company. It's used to call it the 3-year plan. You stay somewhere 3 years, you go to the next company. You stay somewhere 3 years, you go to the next company. And I've worked with some companies where I stayed 7 years. The last job I had, I stayed 7 years, just about, doing exactly the same job, which was very unusual for me, very unusual for the industry, but it was one of those jobs where you just didn't want to let go of it. It was the perfect job to have until now. This was really the perfect job. But up until that point, why would you leave? I stayed somewhere 7 years, and there were some good reasons to do that. And if I'm always learning, it's very rare that you would be in one job and you would constantly be learning for that entire 7-year period. That was a job where I was a systems engineer for a next generation firewall company, and you're always learning something. So that's the real key for me, is to really approach it from that perspective. Phone lines are chockers, so let's get back to it. 201 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Professor Messer. My name is Rolando Casada. I'm calling from New Jersey.
Rolando, thanks for calling.
I'm calling because I've just been offered a job as a network engineer, entry level, and I'm just looking for some advice. What would you advise someone? Because I'm already thinking, based on the compensation that I'm going to be receiving, is really well below like market rate for my area. So I'm already thinking ahead and trying to see. In 6 months, I'm trying to move maybe into like healthcare IT, because with this company, they kind of work with the DoD, and I'm a veteran. So, I'm just I honestly took the job because it's my first IT job, and I'm just trying to get the experience and move up. So I was just trying to see what advice would you have for someone in my position.
My advice and my sort of the story you give is kind of exactly how things generally work. Your first job in IT is always bad pay. They know you don't know anything yet, and you don't know anything yet. So you're going to have to get into the job and start learning some things. And I think that's one of the advantages you have when you start in this industry, is that we know you've never done this before. You've not done it before. There's plenty of opportunity to learn things. And especially if you're in kind of a help desk or support position, which we generally tend to be in IT, and you have a networking position as your first one, this is actually phenomenal. I think there is no better set of foundational knowledge in IT than the networking knowledge, because that knowledge is used by every other aspect of IT, the operating systems, the hardware, the application development, the databases, the cloud computing, the security. It all has a foundation, this networking side. So I could not hope for a better place for you to be right now than with a bunch of people doing networking. I think that's a great place to start. Is the pay awful? Absolutely. Pay when you first start out, the pay's horrible. But it's like any other job. It's sort of that first job you get in IT is kind of that grunt position. You are doing things that nobody else wants to do, and they're paying you very little for it. The difference, though, with IT is that the ability to move up, to make more money, to have more flexibility, to do the things you want to do in the future, and to build the career that you would like to have there's no better place to be to make that happen than IT, because there are jobs doing anything. There's jobs doing things in the future we haven't even thought of yet. And when I started in this industry, there was no internet. So the industry has changed dramatically in a very short period of time. It's a very short, I'm trying to explain, it was really, really short between the time I started and where I am now. Just years, just a small midget, right there, little tiny thing. My recommendation for you is to get into that job and learn as much as you can. If they're putting you in this networking position, most certainly they're going to want you to have some type of networking certification. They might help you through getting CCNA certification, which, by the way, is a great door opener if you're planning to go somewhere else in the future to do something else. And you've already got the foundation and the knowledge and the daily work to go along with that. That's pretty solid. So there are things you will be able to learn in this very low-paying, grunty kind of job that you have managed to find yourself in. The important thing is now you're in the job. You got your foot in the door. You got the job. So this is phenomenal. It's not going to end with this, by the way. You'll be able, the next job you get, you're already thinking, what's the next job going to be? And you should be thinking that way, because that's going to get you to that next job, which is, what do you want that job to be? Will you be building on what you're learning now? Will you be wanting to learn some other types of technologies? Do you ultimately want to get into another section of IT? Is there a particular set of technologies that interest you the most? If cloud computing is your thing, then what cloud computing technologies do you need to learn? What certifications do you need to get? So there's a whole set of things you have to pull together to make this happen. But I would stress to you that it's fantastic that you have this crappy, poorly paid job to go to, because it's going to be a huge opportunity to learn. It's going to be a fantastic place to be a sponge and take advantage of that. Because once you get the job and you're in the industry, now you can go talk to anybody who's hiring. Maybe not in 3 months, maybe in a year is a good time to turn that around. I would say invest yourself in this company for a year and then look to see where you can go from there. Employers they like to see that you're in a job at least a year. I just mentioned that kind of the 3-year plan is what we normally do. But I myself have been in jobs 6 to 9 months and jump ship, because sometimes you just can't stand it anymore. And I made bad decisions throughout my career where I would have a great job and then I have a horrible job. And then, and it was obvious, the red flags were there. I just ignored them, but it happens. But you learn from that, and then you find the next place to go to that makes sense. And then you can stay in that job for 3 years and do what you want to do from that. I seem to do it every other job. I seem to pick a bad one. I ended on a high note, and then finally started doing what I'm doing now full time. So you can do the same thing. Just have a plan, be ready to learn, work hard at learning that, and then it's going to be so easy to make the jump to wherever you want to go from there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm kind of nervous because I've been trying to prepare as much as I can for my start date. And I already have the CCNA and everything. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why they hired me for that position.
Great.
But the thing is that I got my CCNA about 8 months ago while I was still in the military service. And now I'm kind of like refreshing, trying to review the books that I used to study with and things like that. And I'm kind of, in the back of my head, I'm kind of, wow, am I in over my head for this position because I studied for this so long ago? And, due to the COVID and everything, it took a long time for me to find a job. And I just want to prepare as as best as I can for when I start the position. I don't want to be incompetent. I don't want them to be talking about the OSI model, which they asked me in the interview. And some of those things in the interview I completely messed up. I'm like, because I had studied it like 8 months ago. And I'm like, I have the certification, but now these people are asking me all these questions of things that I study and I completely forgot.
This is sort of the people who are watching the stream can see me kind of smiling over this, because in IT, you will never know everything you need to know to have a job that you're in. In fact, if you're in a job and you seem to find yourself knowing everything, you really are in the wrong job. You really should be doing something else at that point. I mentioned that last job working for another company, I worked in that job for 7 years. Every day of that job I worked for 7 years, a customer would ask me a question that I did not know the answer to. Every day, because we were dealing with very technical products. It's next generation firewalls. In fact, I was with the company that made the first next generation firewall. Imagine walking into a customer and saying, I have a brand new product you've never seen before. Nobody in the world has ever seen this before. Nobody's got it installed. Very few people have even plugged it in. But it's the most amazing technology that the industry has seen in a very long time. And it's going to blow your socks off. Let me show you what this can do. And they had tons of questions. It was the first time I'd ever worked with this technology, because prior to working for this company, the technology didn't exist. So every day someone would ask me a question I didn't know. Plus, these are highly complex topics. Now, I did know most of the questions. Let's not go crazy, but they're going to ask you questions about technologies that, like OSI. You've not been working in the industry long enough to know how all these OSI model things go together. Maybe you haven't done a lot of packet captures to even see them stacked up inside of Wireshark. And maybe you need to have some stick time. You need to have some time working at the keyboard with these switches, breaking things. Those become important too. Knowing when something breaks, how to fix it is one of the best learning experiences you're going to run into. When there's an outage, it should immediately ring a bell in your mind that, oh, we just had an outage. This is an opportunity for me to learn something. I worked in some environments where there were a lot of engineers, and when something would have an outage, there were a certain group of people that suddenly were not available. Like, he was just here. Where did he go? Because they didn't like to be involved when there was an outage. You should be running to those fires, because that's the only time you're going to learn a lot of information in a very short period of time. In fact, you'll go through an outage and there'll be things that you don't quite get. Like, we got it back up and running, but I don't know how we did that. And then that night you're sitting in bed just before you go to sleep and you realize, oh, wait a second. That's why that worked out. Suddenly everything clicks and you figure out all of these pieces because there was that outage. Those are the ones where you really are learning quite a bit in a very short period of time. And I think it's a valuable thing to be in. You've got the foundational pieces sort of from a certification perspective. That CCNA is very valuable. Make sure you continue to maintain that certification so that it does not expire. But that is what you're going to be building on, getting the hands-on in the field with the real world networking that you're going to be doing. You're going to make some mistakes. Things are going to break. That's just normal. The key is now to learn from those things and now be able to use that knowledge into whatever the next step is going to be. Sounds like you have a very good foundation to work from, Rolando.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Professor Mester. Thank you for everything you do. I've gotten, the A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and up to the CISO Plus and CCNA, and I really appreciate all your content. It helped me tremendously.
You are well positioned. Go out and do something with all these certifications. Get the experience you need to get. Meet the people in the industry who are working there. Go to the Cisco user group meetings. Meet the people that are there. Build those relationships. You're going to be just fine.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Appreciate the call. Best of luck. That's fantastic. Well, it's a good foundation. Kind of worked on all those certs. He has a huge set of certs that he got to throw out. Like, here's all the stuff I got. And apparently it worked for him. So that now it's just get all the other pieces in place. Those of you that watched that 30-minute video on how to get a job in IT with no experience know that I talk about industry certifications. That's important. But there's 3 other elements that I have in there. One is a sort of a formal education, getting a 4-year degree, a 2-year degree. It's not required, but it does help. The other is having some practical experience. Kind of hard to get if you don't have that first job yet, but I talk in that video of ways you can do that. And then the last one is knowing someone. Having a personal, doesn't have to be a close personal relationship, but knowing people at a personal level who are in the industry that you could say, oh yeah, I know them. I met them in a Cisco user group. I met them at a trade show. That's really useful. This is so useful to be able to have that knowledge of someone who already works there. It goes a long way. Don't dismiss that. It's extremely useful. Someone was actually mentioning, because he mentioned on the last call how every day it seems like you're someone who shouldn't be working at that job. You are the Peter principle, they call it, where you have worked up to a level of your incompetence. Well, in IT, there's a lot we don't know. You know, when I was working with this next generation firewall company, my expertise was in sort of the routing, switching, firewalling, a little bit of API type coding, some coding, I want to call it coding, but some scripting. That was sort of my expertise. One thing I did not have a lot of expertise in was BGP in large scale environments. And so I'd go into a customer and they say, we have this need for this particular design for BGP in this very large scale environment. I'd be like, I've not worked with that, but I have someone on my team that has. Let me go interact with him and make sure we're all on the same page. I think it will work, but let's confirm. But knowing that you feel comfortable saying, I don't know, is very freeing. It's very empowering from a technology perspective. We feel like sometimes we should know everything, but not knowing, nobody knows everything. You're going to be in a situation where somebody asks something and you're going to have to say, I have no idea, but I know where to go to get that information and we'll figure this out. And in fact, going through that process teaches you the thing you didn't know. And now there's another thing you add to your list. So imposter syndrome, the Peter principle, they're all very similar in that, but be ready to learn, be a sponge, be the one that's in the front of the room in the training classes, be the one asking the questions. When they say, has everybody got that? And having nobody answer, they know somebody in the room didn't get it. You should be the one. If you didn't get it, go, all right, hold on. Can you go through that part one more time? Because I'm clearly an idiot. So I'm not making the jump. Let's go make the jump. And somebody else in the room will come up afterward and say, I'm so glad you asked that because I was not following anything. Why do you say something? Well, because people are afraid to say, I don't know. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know. It's a learning opportunity. Let's go to 646. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from? Caller. Did you lose your phone line too, caller? Because that's, oh, wait. They did. They dropped right off. Oh, I didn't. Did I do it just by saying it? Did they drop off? Because apparently. Let's go back. Is this our original caller, 626? Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from?
Hey, I'm Ricky from California. Hi, Professor. I was the caller that got dropped.
Hi, Ricky. You were the one because I didn't pay my bills. You got dropped off the phone line. Yeah. Thank you for calling back.
I'm so sorry. I thought I offended you because I was talking and it got hung up on,
No, it's kind of hard to, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I have a YouTube channel. It's really hard to offend me at this point.
All right. So yeah, basically, you were just talking about, your one of the good jobs you had and the bad jobs, and I want to share my experience, and I want to see what your thoughts were on this.
Hit me.
So one of the first IT jobs I had was doing desktop support for a small business. Initially, when I first worked there, I was learning a lot about Active Directory, password changes, Windows 10. This is stuff that normally gets covered on A+, and which is good. You're learning things in an enterprise environment. Then a month later into the job, there was like a huge blackout in the company. And then it turned out, I found out that there was Windows NT machines in the production area, and the power supplies blew out on those.
Wow.
So we were able to restore them back on by replacing a power supply. But then I had to ask one of the senior programmers why couldn't we get any of the software working? And then he told us because it was something related to IDE drives and SCSI drives.
Wow.
That's when I realized we take our newest Windows for granted. We just simply update Windows and everything goes.
Right.
And then I did more research. The vendor that provided the CD disks for those drives shut down 10 years ago.
Oh.
And yeah, and it was one disaster after another. And then, our boss said, just, you know what, leave that computer to the side and we'll figure it out. And then I left that job shortly after because I didn't see growth in learning legacy software. So as I was looking for new jobs, a lot of employers were asking me, why are you leaving that job after 6 months? And I said, well, it's because I kind of hit my peak there, learning legacy systems and nothing else. What are your thoughts on that when the employers ask you on why are you leaving your job after 6 months?
The answer after 6 months is a difficult one because usually they're asking the question because people don't generally leave after 6 months. What's going on there? They're really trying to find out what's going on there. And you need to give them, for such a short period of time, it's good if you can give them an honest answer that fits well with how they are looking to hire somebody. And maybe the question was it was a very short ramp. I did peak 6 months in there. There's we had a small number of devices. I'm ready for a bigger challenge. Those should be the words that you should always say, regardless how long it's been. I need a bigger challenge. In fact, you could even say I work really well with management at this company. I really like the people I'm working with. I think having an assurance from a personal level to this new employer that you're really a good person to work with. They're not throwing you out and they're not trying to fire you, but just say that you love the people you work with, but you're just very limited on the technology. They're running a lot of older legacy systems, and I'd really like to learn some of the newest technologies and be more comfortable with larger scales of implementations with Windows Active Directory and Windows 10. Those are perfectly reasonable reasons to leave a company after 6 months. Never tell a prospective employer anything negative. Oh, I hate working there. They're always dinging you if you walk in 5 minutes late. That you don't get any credit for staying late. They don't give me any educational opportunities. These may, by the way, be the reasons you're leaving, but you should never say that to a prospective employer. I think, in fact, I think the things that you ran into are actually good situations for learning how to deal with some of these legacy systems. This will not be the only time you see a legacy system running in production. Every organization has one somewhere that is doing, somebody's got Token Ring running somewhere, I'm sure. You run into it every once in a while to be able to find that. But how do you handle that then? The company shut down 10 years ago. What are the things you have to do to be able to keep that system up and running? How do you become someone who is able to maintain and really rely on that system? If the whole system died tomorrow, if that IDE drive, if that PATA drive failed, what would you do? What would the company do? So there needed to be something in place. There needed to be a backup process that was NT. There's plenty of backup processes for NT. In fact, this would be a great place to take advantage of open source software. How could you make sure that system could be reimaged onto something else? Does it run in a VM? Has anybody even tried? There's all these things you can do. And that's one of the things you could bring up to an employer, and they're going to ask questions about what was a challenge you ran into and how did you resolve that problem? Well, here, let me tell you this story. You're going to love this one. And at first, it's a great story. And secondly, you can say how you position the company to keep that system running indefinitely because you put these backup restore processes in place. It's not going to be the first time you're going to have to do it. It's painful, but you do learn a lot. And if anybody ever comes up and asks you a question about Windows NT again, you got it.
Yes. Oh, boy. Yeah, it was a very, very painful learning process on, doing all of that. That was, your insight was very helpful. and thank you so much, Professor, for what you're doing.
Thanks, Ricky. Sorry for hanging up on you earlier. Thank you for calling back.
All right, thank you.
You know, one of the first certifications I got in the industry was an MCSE, a Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer for Windows NT. So I took six examinations, 6 certification exams I had to pass, all about Windows NT. But I got to tell you, not much has changed with the kernel. Windows is sort of Windows. It Active Directory is sort of Active Directory. There's been, of course, feature changes, updates to the way things work. But as people in the chat room are mentioning, you'd be surprised how much Windows NT is out there. There is still Windows NT running out there in the world. Absolutely. Hopefully it's not connected to a network anywhere, but it's still out there. So think about this. What an interesting set. We can sit around and do a tabletop exercise, disaster recovery with Windows NT. We lose the drive in that Windows NT machine. What do? Have you made a backup? What's the backup format in? Where's the documentation of how to restore this machine? Have we run it on other hardware? Does it work on a machine that's got a SATA drive? Does it work on a VM? There's some NT that runs on VM. But there may be specialized hardware. You may not be able to run it on a VM. There may be a specialized adapter card that has to go into it, or there may be just limitations that don't allow you. There needs to be a process to do that. All this talk of snow, let's go to the 305 area code. Hi, caller. Let's see if it'll pick up the phone lines. It's still angry at me for not, there it is, picked up the phone line. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, how's it going? This is Tycho. I'm calling from Virginia.
Hi, thank you for calling. What can we do for you?
So I was wondering, how do you prepare for an interview, I guess, for the IT field, especially when they want to ask what are your weaknesses if you're new to the field?
This is, I hate this question. And of course, because I hate it so much, they always ask it. Tell me about your strengths and your weaknesses. It's kind of a softball question. It's a question from people that usually don't know what questions to ask on an interview, but that's okay. The key with answering questions during an interview is very similar to watching a politician answer questions. And in that, first, a little bit different because you're actually going to give an answer, but you need to give the answer you want to give. You effectively need to answer the question that you wish they would have asked you and not actually answer the question they're going to ask you. When they say, what's your greatest weakness? Well, I like to leave early all the time. You don't want to give anything honest about this. Well, I like to extend my breaks out to be hour long instead of 15 minutes. That's not what they're trying to do. They really are hoping you'll give them a weakness, which is fantastic from the position of somebody trying to hire. And very often I have had people give me actual weaknesses of theirs. That's not what you want. You want to kind of spin it into something that's more of a positive. When I'm faced with a problem that I don't know the answer to, I spend all of my time trying to hunt down that answer. It might take me days. I am tenacious. I really am obsessed with solving those difficult problems to the point where it really takes up a lot of my day to really get into the problem and understand what's going on until I can solve that. Boy, that's just one of the biggest weaknesses I have is I really like to see those problems really solved. That's an example of taking something that sounds like a very positive thing to me and turning into, isn't that so negative that I'm just tenacious? No, that was a good thing. But if you could spin it into you being how do I handle a question about weakness? That's the way you do it. What you don't want to do is give an actual weakness. You want to be prepared for this and perhaps even have a story that goes along with it. So somebody said to me, tell me about your biggest weakness. Mine is more of perfectionism. I really have to watch myself that when I'm putting together a document, I'm writing a book, I'm creating a video, I'm creating content, I double and triple check the content itself and often have found myself putting incorrect information in because that's what I was taught. And it turns out what I was taught was wrong. But I went back and read the standard and found out that the standard says something completely different. And I'm glad I did that. Had I not been so much of a perfectionist, I never would have found that. So I can give specific examples of those, because that's what the person interviewing you wants, is examples to go along with it. They never just want a simple answer. What's your biggest weakness? I'm a perfectionist. That's it. That's it. No, I need a story. I need to talk more and explain why that is, and give an example of where I was able to use that. At the end of the story, though, I'm the hero. The weakness is not a weakness at all. It's a reason that you should hire me for this job. So whenever you're given any type of question like that is supposedly asking you something in a negative light, you should always spin the question around to how it can make you look better. That is first probably not what they want as an answer, but then again, the people asking this question weren't really looking for the actual answer anyway. It is a softball question, and the person asking it is not really someone who interviews a lot. There's a separate set of questions for technical people that you would kind of start with a broad question and then drill down from there. This is really where you'd focus is find 3 or 4 different stories of things you've done, turn them into the positive, but talk about them like they're negative. And I think that is the only thing you can do when faced with that question that is in any way going to help you during the interview process. Whatever you do, don't say anything negative.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. That was very helpful.
I appreciate the call. Thank you, Taekwon.
No problem. Take care.
I think whenever I'm in a interview situation, I've been through so many interviews at this point, not just from the side of someone trying to get the job, but I've done so. Okay, so I think I'm going to reset this. Oh, wait, we're back. Excellent connection. See, you just needed to wait a moment. And then we're back and running again. Hopefully, everybody else can see that we're back and running as well. Holy cow. So this is my day, by the way, the up and down. I really do think this is probably related to the weather here in the U.S. It is just phenomenal. The amount of snow that has come down, the ice that's on this. I have not lost the internet connection on this side. So at least I know locally I'm okay. But you could see we're clearly, at least YouTube and probably the YouTube data centers are having challenges as well. To finish up that point, though, always give an answer that is positive. Always have a story to go along with this. If you haven't written down or parsed out or created an index card or a set of cheat sheets, 4 or 5 good stories to talk at a technical level about, or at a sort of a here's the outage we had and how we solved it. Those are great stories to talk to a prospective employer about, because they show you've been through the trenches. You've had situations that were high stress. You were able to solve that particular problem. And it's maybe not just you solving it, it's a group of people. And then you've got something to talk about during the interview. There was nothing more frustrating for somebody interviewing a prospective employee to say, tell me about a problem you had and how you solved it. Yeah, we had an internet outage and wiggled the cable and we came back up. All right, that was it. I needed like 5 minutes of a story. I needed a story. It was a dark and stormy night, and we were up late working on this other problem, and we were in the data center, and here's what happened. That's what you need. And here's what we did, and here's what happened, and here's where this came from. That's the focus to be on. There are some great YouTube channels out there that talk about how to respond to questions during an interview. There's even starting from the very beginning. Tell me about yourself. There's an opportunity there. Anytime you have a chance to say something during an interview, there's an opportunity. So you should have tell me about yourself. Tell me about this. I see you're working right now as a blah, blah, blah. Tell me about that. It's wide open. That's how I would usually start the conversation. tell me everything you know about this very broad topic. And then they talk about 5 or 6 different things. Well, let's drill down on one of those things you mentioned. Boom. And we drill down on these. It's just to see how deep you could get into doing that. Oh, what tools did you use to do that with? Oh, I use Wireshark. What have you done in Wireshark? Oh, you've done packet captures and decodes. Have you ever done any SSL decryption in Wireshark? Have you ever looked at the monitoring tools in Wireshark? Have you ever put together a VoIP conversation and listened to the phone call in Wireshark? You know, there's conversations you can have by drilling down on those pieces. And you should have stories about this. Oh, let me tell you a time when we use Wireshark. Here's the situation. So sometimes you have to have 4 or 5 of these that you could pull from and be able to have that conversation. But that's probably more than any other tool you use. Wireshark has a lot of stories. You will always have stories from Wireshark. If you become very good at Wireshark, it's almost like you're able to read the matrix. But if you can start getting that sort of that 12 lead EKG view of the Wireshark and start seeing the patterns inside of it, there are so many stories you're going to have about networks not performing properly, applications not performing properly, secure applications not sending information securely. It is a remarkable tool. And the more you know about it, the more stories you're going to have to be able to do that. And you're right, chat room. It's remarkable how many traffic patterns that were unexpected suddenly become apparent, and then it drills down into further things. When I worked for the next generation firewall company, I was responsible for bringing in the evaluation units. So I would show up in the morning, we would plug in a firewall, we would connect it to the network, we'd probably connect it to a span connection or a port mirrored connection, and just send information into the firewall so it was very passive. And then we go to lunch, because if you're working for a vendor, you take people to lunch. Then you come back, and then, well, let's see what we found while this has been running for an hour or 2. And then we jump into the product, we show the interface, and we start looking at what people were doing. And the stories that I have from people that were at work, at their desk, in a building, and the things they were looking at were remarkable. It's remarkable what you're able to find. Sometimes these things were people who were using equipment for inappropriate reasons. Sometimes they were hosting services that they should not have been hosted on company materials. Sometimes they were going to websites they should not be going to. Sometimes we found machines that were infected with a botnet that nobody knew about. These are valuable. There's 3 stories right there. And the way that you're able to now gather all these stories together and present them, like, here's a situation, we discovered a botnet that nobody knew about, and here's how we did it, and here's what we did. I have very often been on a corporate network where we brought up the very first screen that said, well, here's the rundown of the top 10 applications running on your network. Boy, there's a lot of BitTorrent here. And they go, really? Where's BitTorrent coming from? You click a button, it shows you all the BitTorrent, all the workstations running BitTorrent. I've literally had customers say, wait right here, please, we'll be right back. And they leave the room, and then it's got to be kind of a common thing. And, we check emails and blah, blah, blah. They come back, and they go, okay, we can continue. Well, let's look at our top 10 applications on the network for the past 10 minutes. I noticed BitTorrent's not there anymore. And then we can continue with the conversation. And you kind of get to see what's going on in environments and how people are using the network. And that is how Jim got fired. There were a number of people, when you walk in with a product like a next generation firewall, unfortunately, there are a number of people who lose their jobs because you went in to do an evaluation. But I didn't get them fired. They got themselves fired. They just weren't ready for somebody to be able to have the level of visibility we had to see what they were doing on the network. And in some cases, some of the things we discovered were illegal, not just inappropriate or unethical, but there were times when, as a security professional, you are in a position that often you will be dealing with law enforcement. So there were times when that would happen as well. And those are uncomfortable situations, but necessary because of the type of content that we were seeing on people's networks. It's a weird world out there sometimes. Back to the phone lines. It's Kyle. Hi, Kyle. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Hey, Professor Messer. It's Kyle. I called you like 2 weeks ago. I don't know if you remember me.
Your name is still in my database, Kyle.
Okay.
I don't remember what we
So
talked about,
I
though,
just
so remind me.
Okay. So it's gonna be like a quick question. If you were like back in like high school and a teenager, like what would you do differently to be successful in IT? Like what is the steps that you will be willing to take? Would you go on the certs route, college route? What would you do if you were a high school senior right now?
Oh boy. I have to kind of think back to when I was high school senior. Dinosaurs ruled the earth. We were, back when I was in high school, was sort of the beginnings of personal computers. Not to date myself, but there is a reality there of that. And people were just getting into it. I was doing a lot of basic programming. I was building my own applications. I was just sort of learning how the computers worked at that point. Your question's a little more broader than that, though, which is kind of this ongoing challenge we have between a practical degree, a formal 4-year college degree, and kind of a practical experience. This is a challenge people in the trades have every day. In a way, being a network administrator is not unlike somebody who is an electrician or a plumber or has one of these trade type jobs, because it is very focused on problem solving. There's a set of skills you need to be able to do it. It does not require the knowledge of someone with a 4-year degree to be able to manage a Cisco network. There's quite a bit of jobs that I've worked a lot with people in the industry who don't have a formal degree. They don't have a college degree. I think most people, you need a high school degree. I think that's an important one, at least in the States, that you have the high school degree. But I don't want to say a 4-year degree is optional, because there are times later on in your career where you may find that a formal degree does provide you with some options. But I have worked with people very closely in my industry who were at a higher level than I was, that were making more money than I was, that did not have a college degree, because the type of jobs that we had don't require one. You don't have to know anything about history or calculus or economics to be able to very competently manage a Cisco switch and router network, for example, a Microsoft network, a cloud-based network installation. Are there things you can learn in college that can help you along those lines? Absolutely, there is. But we're sort of in this weird place in our I don't know, in the progression of college, that people are starting to rethink, do I want to take on all that debt? Am I really getting a return on that investment? And it's a valid question to ask. There are a number of organizations out there and learning facilities out there that focus more on technology to get you into a position. In the UK, getting a technology job, you can become an apprentice to get into technology, just like sort of a normal trade job would be, because it makes perfect sense. And just like a lot of trade jobs in this country, IT can present you with jobs where you're making 6 figures. The jobs are out there. It's not incredibly complicated to get to that point to be able to have a job that makes that kind of money. So I think that it's kind of something you have to feel out for yourself. The people I've worked with who did not have a formal college degree would often tell me, I kind of wish I had one, because I might want to go into management with this company. And at a management level, they want you to have a 4-year degree. And I don't have one. So I feel like I'm at a disadvantage in the interview process, which was probably a pretty accurate representation. A lot of companies like to see a 4-year degree if you're going into management. I have a 4-year degree. Mine is in business management. And the entire time I was working was a more of a technical job. I wasn't using necessarily the things that I learned in college about cost accounting and calculus and economics and personnel management. Very little of that helped me when I finally got into the industry. Instead, I needed to know more about Microsoft and hardware and networking and routing protocols and security and the things they didn't teach you in college. Just things that, by the way, they still don't teach a lot of in college. So that's the challenge you'll run into, is that's a balancing act and a decision you're going to have to make for yourself on, do you go the 2 or 4 year degree route and then kind of circle around back into technology from there? Do you go into a route where it's maybe a more focused learning from a 2-year college and you get an AA degree that has some certifications in the back end of it, and then you go into jobs? You know, it's a balancing act. The chat room's sort of torn as well with college is valuable, college is not valuable. The reality is there's something in the middle there. It's really, now you have to figure out, do you have the time and the money and the effort to be able to deal with that for 2 or 4 years? And what options are available in your area for technical job if you do or don't have that? Are companies asking for that for an entry-level position in your particular area? In the DC area, they might be. There might be almost every job in DC might require a college degree, or it might not. I don't know. I haven't looked at them lately. So that's another thing you'll have to do, is figure out those pieces too, Kyle.
Yeah, especially now, like with college, being online, everybody's like questioning college. And I just want to get your opinion on that.
That's sort of the thing that I think poor people that were running colleges they've been really enjoying this lately. The costs difference, the increase in costs from the time I went to college until college now is ridiculous. It's very obviously there have been a huge increase in costs. There's many reasons why that happened, but regardless, there's been a huge increase in costs. Because of that, we were sort of, and the colleges were kind of leaning on, but look at the experience we're giving you. You can come to campus and you can meet all these people, and there's parties, and you can sit out on the campus lawn during the weekends. We have a fantastic place. Our libraries are second to none. You can participate with the football team or the band or the thing over here or this club. Well, all of those things I just mentioned don't exist online. None of that exists online. And now everybody's effectively on the same playing field. And how do you justify paying big money on this particular college versus maybe not as much money on a different college to get the same classes and the same skills? It's a fine question. And poor colleges are trying to differentiate themselves right now, and they're not doing a great job of it. I'm speaking as someone, my daughter just got an IT certification kind of in the middle of all this. I have a son who is in a cloud computing program with a school right now, and then I have another one that's working towards his AA degree. So I personally think there's value in college, or I would not be sending and paying for my own children to go to those. But I also have kind of tried to focus them down a road that they now have a skill set that they can use after college that hopefully is not going to limit them. They're not getting a music degree when I know they're going to be getting a job that has something to do with technology. Now, if you're going to go into music, that's different. But in this particular case, my kids are wanting to do something else along those lines. So that's why it is a combination of what you want to do versus what employers are expecting to see from you versus where you happen to be in your geography. And figuring out if that's going to be an important goal for you in the future to your longer term goals. I think there's no good answer that I can give because I have mixed opinions on both sides of the value and non-value of a four-year university. I think now the important part is figuring out how it fits best with your personal strategy. And if a four-year degree fits well with that, then that makes perfect sense. There's a lot of IT jobs out there that don't require a four-year degree. Just be prepared to handle the negatives, and you may not be able to ask as much money because you don't have a four-year degree. I don't know. That depends on what people are hiring for right now. It's kind of a non-answer. I've kind of given you both answers for a single question, but that's kind of the situation we're in right now. And you're right, with it all online, now everybody's sort of on the same playing field. So why are we having to pay all these ridiculous amounts if I'm doing all of this from my computer screen? These are fine questions to ask, and I don't know that we have an answer quite yet, Kyle.
Yeah, well, I just wanted your answer, but thank you so much, sir.
I appreciate the call. Best of luck. It's sort of a non-answer. I'm sort of copping out of that answer because, well, I've got a four-year degree. I'm encouraging my kids to get a four-year degree, but only because employers are still asking for the four-year degree. If employers weren't asking for that from an IT perspective, then I might have a different set of answers for you. But I'm also very jaded. I'm kind of negative to the whole college experience and what they've done with the costs, because I feel like some of that may not be legitimate. Some of it doesn't, like it went up so fast. The increase in costs went up so quickly that as a parent, looking at this and wondering, why does it cost so much to go to college? That seems like a lot of money. It did, and the costs keep going up at a increasing rate. Why is that? So I have those questions as someone who is paying for college. My real question, though, is without all that, we take that out of the equation. Is it going to still be useful? I mean, there is a balancing act, right? It still can cost a lot, but it could also be valuable. So is it? Depends on how you use it, I guess. That's the real key, is focusing on it from that perspective. I know we're over time here, but let's go back to the calls. One more. We've got one here from the 978 area code. If I can push the button. Apparently I cannot. There it is. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from?
Hello, this is Tad. I'm calling from Massachusetts.
Hi, what's your question?
So recently, 2020, I decided to join the military, and so the job I was able to get, it was a job where it was it required that I had my Sec Plus, my Security Plus certification. So I went through boot camp, I went to tech school, I got my Sec Plus. Better than anything, I got paid to get my Sec Plus.
Nice.
And so now that I am out in the civilian world, I'm a reservist, by the way, so I'm allowed to use my skill sets for my own, civilian life. So also, I just want to say thank you, by the way, because I loved your videos that helped me pass my Sec Plus. You had 2 weeks to do it, and I was able to pass it. So thank you for that.
Congratulations. That's a very short period of time.
Yes. And this all I had was just a computer engineering associates at the time, so that was my only background. But your content definitely helped me a lot on top of other study material. So now that I'm in the civilian world and I'm looking for a job, I do have a security clearance, but I'm waiting for that to go through. Like, what jobs do I really qualify for? I was offered an ISSO position, but again, I needed a clearance for that, so I couldn't take that. But like, now that I have a Sec Plus, I do have an associate's degree in computer engineering. Like, what entry level jobs can I build on to that I would qualify for? Because like, even though I learned so much in such a short period of time through tech school, like when I do apply for jobs, sometimes it feels like, oh man, am I really qualified for some of these jobs? But they're asking because they may say a bachelor's is preferred but not needed. But then they look at, oh well, he has experience with VMware, he has experience with encryption, Wireshark, all this stuff. So in your opinion, like for an entry level job to build a skill set to, let's say I want to become a network admin or an ISSM, like what would you recommend to look into?
This is kind of the problem and the frustration I think many people have when they're trying to get a job in IT, is that it's not a standard set of checklist items that you need to qualify for. There's so many sort of gray areas where we have to fit the right people in. Because when I'm interviewing somebody, I'm of course interested in their formal education. I'm interested in their certifications they may have. I'm interested in sort of what they've done with their life. So in your case, thank you for your service. You've got a whole set of skills and experiences that's different than someone else who may have not gone through that same set of circumstances. And those might be an advantage for someone who walks in the room. So even though you don't have a 4-year degree, you have a set of experiences that might be maybe a little more valuable in a particular job, or I might consider it to be more valuable that you were in the military versus someone who had a 4-year degree. So you should first, for anybody who's listening, and you look at these crazy job postings where they want somebody who has some type of knowledge in nuclear fission and really what to be able to manage a Microsoft network. I don't know the craziness they put on these job postings, but if you ever see a job posting that really looks like something you can do, but they're asking for requirements that seem to be well outside the scope, that's okay. You should submit your job posting. You should submit your resume to that job posting anyway. You should not be the one disqualifying yourself. That's not your job. Your job is to look at the job posting, see if it really does fit what your knowledge base is. And if you really think it does, you should apply. They can be the ones to reject you. And after a while, when you start sending resumes in, the first rejection kind of hurts. The second one, not as bad. By the time you get to the 10th rejection, you're like, okay, we'll add it to the stack. No problem. Keep it moving. Because one of those is going to hit. It's a numbers game. But you should let them be the one to decide whether you are the one who should make or not make that particular job. And I've got a set of videos I did that sort of talk around that to explain why your resume keeps getting rejected. I did a couple of videos with 10 different tips on why your resume is constantly being rejected. And it was that's only one piece of the equation. But there's also all of these other things that combine with that. What's your personality like? What knowledge have you had? Tell me about some stories about when a network broke. Tell me about all these other pieces. And if you want to go into security, if you want to do anything with operating systems, you had mentioned having an interest in the networking side. I think that's a fantastic foundation to be able to move into almost everything else in IT. And if you've got your Security Plus, that already tells people you have an interest and there's some knowledge that you have regarding that. Your formal education has some technology in it that goes towards this. If you really were trying to focus on networking and you start looking at the jobs in your area, you may find CCNA pops up quite a bit. That probably is the kind of the standard for switch and router management, is at a bare minimum having that Cisco Certified Network Administrator certification. So that may be the next one on your list, is if you had to find a place to kind of move in a direction that gets you towards doing anything in networking, it's going to be that CCNA ultimately. And if your focus really is in networking, I want to be able to manage networks. I want to be able to work with switches. I want to be able to work with routers. I want to integrate these on a large scale. You can go ahead and start working on that CCNA. That's going to be a standard piece that every employer is going to want to see. If you're just working in a network operations center, working on a help desk, maybe networking is not your long-term goal, maybe working with operating systems might be, then maybe Network Plus would be a better choice for that particular scenario. But it sounds like to me you have an idea of what you would like to do. There's jobs out there that do it. You just need to focus your list of credentials together, and I think CCNA would be a good one to add to that list.
I see. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it.
I think if you ever want to figure out, and it's sort of the recommendation I gave earlier, is in your particular geography, make that spreadsheet of all of the open positions in your area that interest you. See what they're asking for. And if If CCNA comes up a lot, that's the one you should go with. I don't know. Maybe employers are starting to move a different direction, and you find that the Google certification suddenly comes up a lot, or there's a particular Microsoft Azure certification that comes up a lot. Those are good things to know, because then you have an idea of where you can go with this that's going to have a positive impact on your process of getting a job with those organizations. And it may not work 100% across all employers, but guess what? Nothing works 100% across all employers. You kind of have to find the big ones, focus on those, and then when you're talking to an employer, you've at least got some stories to tell along those lines.
That makes a lot of sense. I have noticed that a lot of the jobs, including that deal with networking or IT, a lot of them do require some type of clearance. So I do see that, like, my experience in the military, that being an advantage for me. But I will definitely look into CCNA, because I remember my teachers in tech school, they told me that the next step, if you want to build on what you learned in tech school, would be to get your CCNA. So that definitely seems like it keeps coming up a lot.
It's not an easy cert to get. It's not an entry-level cert. It is kind of a second-level certification to get, but that's where you are. You're sort of at that. You got your Security Plus. You've got these other credentials now under your name. Now we're ready to take it to the next level. It would be a good next step for what you were doing. And I think the people that were giving you that advice were pretty spot on.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate the call. Best of luck. So hard when you need that in the federal government. Having that clearance is such an important part of that. And I'm not well versed in the intricacies. I've only kind of worked with it on the outside, on the periphery of this. But it's a science unto itself. So if you can get that level of coverage, you can get that check mark next to your name. It sure helps in areas like Virginia, DC, where they are looking for that type of thing. Another question from the chat room: can you get an IT support like help desk position with a computer science associate's degree? So a 2-year computer science degree and no cert. Possibly. Computer science is a sort of a realm unto itself. It's not IT. It's more like programming and hardware creation and application development. It's its own world. It sort of makes the apps and the hardware that IT implements and maintains. And so in the Venn diagram of computer science and IT, those two circles barely overlap in the middle. There's not much overlap between those two. That's why you find that IT folks don't do a ton of programming. We do a lot of scripting. Folks over on the computer science side don't do a lot of backups, maintenance. They don't support switches or routers. They don't do the security implementations. They don't manage the firewalls. But they build the hardware and the software that kind of goes in the switches. They sort of build the switches, and then IT implements the switches. You can think of it that way. It's a sort of a combination of those, being able to work through it. Well, we have, as someone in the chat room mentioned, we did a little bit of overtime today. Some of it was self-imposed. Some of it was imposed on me by the folks at YouTube, but we finally made it through. I'll have to go back and look at what was put online, see if we were able to circle back online and have a single replay that we can pull from. I also have a replay here. I may have to edit one out to have that because you didn't get to see what went on here and the panic and the havoc that occurred when we lost our connection. It wasn't that bad. But there was, I'm walking around checking connections, reconnecting to YouTube. At least we made it through. We'll see if the weather, I know there's another set of storms that comes through Thursday. When are we doing another live event? We're doing it on Thursday. So if you'd like to come back and deal with this level of inconsistency and chaos, I've got the live stream for you. Come on back on Thursday. We'll do the Core 2 study group and be able to have those there and available. I've got questions all ready to go. It's already been written. It's really just waiting for you. We'll see you back on Thursday for that one. Same time, 12 noon Eastern. And we'll do another hour of Q&A there. And then we'll open up the phone lines again We'll see what happens with this. I want to thank you for being here this time. Thank you for your ongoing support on the website. Thank you for your support with our products. Thank you for being here on the live stream. We really couldn't do it without you. Thank you for sticking around when everything falls apart. We eventually get it back together. Eventually. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time on the A+ Study Group.